At 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, a woman's scream tore through the expensive silence of the Meridian luxury apartments. Raw, desperate, the kind of sound that separates those who act from those who pretend not to hear. Adrian Moretti, a man whose name made grown men nervous in boardrooms and back alleys alike, stood frozen at his penthouse window with a glass of scotch halfway to his lips. He'd heard gunshots that bothered him less, because gunshots were business. But that scream, that was pure terror, and it was coming from the apartment directly next to his. The apartment where the quiet woman with haunted eyes lived with her too-smooth husband. Adrian set down his glass with careful control and walked toward his door, already knowing that whatever happened in the next 60 seconds would change everything. Some screams you can ignore. This wasn't one of them. Before we dive into this story of protection, power, and the kind of love that rewrites all the rules, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin where everything changed. The thing about living in a building like the Meridian was the illusion of privacy. 16 floors of steel and glass overlooking the city, where tech executives and investment bankers and people who valued discretion paid premium prices for walls thick enough to keep secrets. Adrian Moretti had chosen his penthouse specifically for that reason, because his business required silence, required neighbors who minded their own affairs, required the kind of professional distance that money could buy. He'd lived there for 3 years without learning a single neighbor's name. That was exactly how he wanted it. Until her. He'd first noticed Elena Wright 6 months ago, moving into the unit next to his with almost nothing. 2 suitcases, a box of books, and a tension in her shoulders that Adrian recognized immediately because he'd built an empire on reading people. She was young, mid-20s maybe, with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and eyes that seemed to apologize for taking up space. Pretty in that fragile way that made men want to either protect or destroy. Adrian had pegged her as running from something within 30 seconds of seeing her. What he hadn't known was that she was running to something worse. The husband had appeared 2 weeks later. Marcus Wright, smooth smile, expensive suits, the kind of handshake that lingered too long because he was always performing. He worked in medical equipment sales, drove a leased BMW, and had the aggressive friendliness of men who mistake charm for personality. Adrian had disliked him instantly, though he couldn't have articulated why. Just instinct. The same instinct that told him when a business deal was about to go sideways, when someone was lying about their loyalties, when violence was brewing beneath polite conversation. He'd seen Marcus and Elena together in the hallway a handful of times over the following months. She always looked smaller next to him, like she was trying to fold into herself. Marcus always had his hand on her, lower back, elbow, shoulder. In that possessive way some men touched their women, marking territory. Adrian had made it a point not to care. He had enough complications in his life without adding domestic disputes to the list. But at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in late October, when that scream shattered the careful silence of the Meridian's 16th floor, every instinct Adrian possessed fired at once. He was already moving before conscious thought caught up. The scotch glass hit his marble counter. His bare feet crossed the hardwood floor of his living room. His hand was on the door handle when he heard it again. Not a scream this time, but a crash, the distinct sound of furniture overturning, and then a male voice raised in fury. "You think you can embarrass me? You think you can make me look like a fool in front of my colleagues?" Adrian's jaw tightened. He stepped into the hallway, already calculating. The Meridian had security, but they were posted in the lobby, and by the time they responded to a domestic dispute call, it might be too late. The walls were thick, but not thick enough to completely muffle what was happening 20 feet away. Another crash. A woman's cry, pain this time, not just fear. Adrian crossed the distance between his door and hers in 4 strides. The door was solid wood, expensive, built to last. He tested the handle once, locked, obviously, then took 2 steps back and drove his heel into the wood just beside the lock mechanism. The frame splintered on the first kick. The second sent the door crashing inward. Adrian stepped inside and instantly cataloged the scene with the cold precision that made him dangerous. Living room. Modest furniture, nothing like the expensive pieces in his own place. Overturned coffee table. Shattered lamp. And in the center of it all, Marcus Wright had Elena pinned against the wall by her throat, his other hand drawn back in a fist. Both of them froze when Adrian appeared. Marcus recovered first, his face twisting from rage to confusion to indignation in rapid succession. "What the hell do you think you're—" "Step away from her." Adrian's voice was conversational, almost casual. He'd learned a long time ago that the quieter you spoke, the more carefully people listened. "Now!" "This is none of your business." Marcus didn't release Elena, but his grip loosened slightly, recalculating. "This is between me and my wife. I'm making it my business." Adrian took another step into the apartment, and something in his movement, the fluid certainty of someone who'd hurt people before and would absolutely do it again, made Marcus's survival instincts kick in. "You have 3 seconds to take your hands off her." "You can't just break into my—" 2 seconds. Marcus released Elena like she'd burned him. She slumped against the wall, one hand going to her throat, the other wrapped around her ribs. Her lip was split, bleeding. There was a bruise already forming on her cheekbone. Adrian felt something cold and familiar settle into his chest. The same feeling he got before a negotiation turned violent, before someone made the mistake of thinking his patience was weakness. "Get out," Marcus said, trying to reassert control of the situation. "Get the hell out of my apartment before I call the police." "You should call them." Adrian pulled his phone from his pocket and held it out. "Go ahead. I'm sure they'd be very interested in what's happening here." Marcus's face reddened. "This is a private matter between—" "Does she look like she's here by choice?" Adrian's voice went even quieter, which somehow made it more dangerous. "Does any of this—" He gestured at the destroyed living room, at Elena's bleeding face. "Look consensual to you?" "She's my wife." "That's not a defense." Adrian shifted his weight slightly, a subtle movement that nonetheless put him between Marcus and Elena. "It's actually what makes this worse." For a long moment, no one moved. Adrian could see Marcus doing the math, weighing his options. He was bigger than Adrian by maybe 20 pounds, had the look of someone who worked out regularly. But there was gym muscle, and then there was the kind of strength that came from actual violence. Marcus clearly couldn't tell which category Adrian fell into, and that uncertainty was keeping him from doing something catastrophically stupid. "Elena," Adrian said without taking his eyes off Marcus, "do you want to stay here tonight?" He heard her sharp intake of breath, heard the way it caught like something inside her chest was broken. "Answer him," Marcus snapped. "Tell him this is none of his concern. Tell him to get out." "Elena," Adrian repeated, quieter. "Simple question. Do you feel safe here right now?" The silence stretched. Adrian could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant sound of traffic from the street below, the ragged quality of Elena's breathing. "No," she whispered finally. So quiet he almost missed it. "No, I don't." Adrian nodded once. "Then you're coming with me." "Like hell she is, Marcus started forward, but Adrian moved faster, stepping directly into his space with the kind of deliberate aggression that made Marcus stumble backward. "You're going to stand there," Adrian said, his voice dropping to something that barely qualified as human speech. "And you're going to let her walk out of here. And then you're going to sit down and think very carefully about whether you want me to come back." "You're threatening me? In my own home?" "I'm giving you information." Adrian held his gaze. "What you do with it is your choice." Marcus's hands clenched into fists, but he didn't move forward again. Adrian could see the calculation happening, pride versus self-preservation, fear versus fury. "Get a bag," Adrian told Elena. "Whatever you need for tonight." She didn't move for a moment, just stood there against the wall like she couldn't quite process what was happening. Then she pushed off slowly, wincing at the movement, and disappeared down a hallway. Adrian waited. Marcus stared at him with naked hatred, breathing hard through his nose. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Marcus said. "You don't know anything about her, about us. She provokes me. She pushes until I—" "Stop talking." Adrian's voice cut through the excuse like a blade. "Every word out of your mouth right now is making me reconsider letting you leave this apartment on your own feet." Marcus's mouth snapped shut. Elena emerged 2 minutes later with a small duffel bag. Her hands were shaking so badly the zipper rattled. She kept her eyes down, wouldn't look at either of them. "Let's go," Adrian said. She moved toward him like a ghost, like she was afraid that speaking or breathing too loudly would shatter whatever fragile protection this moment offered. Adrian stepped aside to let her pass into the hallway first, then followed, keeping his body between her and Marcus. "This isn't over," Marcus called after them. "Elena, you hear me? This isn't over. You can't just leave. You're my wife." Adrian paused in the doorway, looked back. "If I see you near her again, we'll have a very different kind of conversation, the kind that doesn't happen in nice apartments with witnesses." He closed the broken door behind them, or tried to. It hung crooked on its damaged frame. Elena stood in the hallway, hugging her duffel bag to her chest, trembling. "Come on," Adrian said quietly. "My place is just here." She followed him without speaking. He unlocked his door and held it open, letting her enter first. She stepped inside tentatively, like she expected a trap, her eyes scanning his penthouse with the wariness of someone who'd learned that safety was usually an illusion. Adrian's place was 3 times the size of hers, all clean lines and expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He decorated it himself, or rather, hired someone to make it look like a place where a successful businessman lived. Neutral colors, modern art, everything chosen for the impression it created rather than any personal attachment. Elena stood in the center of his living room looking lost. "Guest room is down that hall, second door on the right," Adrian said. "Bathroom is the first door. Take whatever you need." She nodded, still not speaking, still not looking at him directly. "Elena," he said, and she finally lifted her eyes. They were dark brown, red-rimmed from crying, filled with something that looked like shock. "You're safe here, understand? Whatever you need, whether that's space or—" "Why did you help me?" Her voice came out rough, damaged, from Marcus's hands on her throat, probably. Adrian considered the question, considered the true answer, that he'd heard her scream and reacted on instinct, that something about her situation had bypassed every filter he normally used to keep other people's problems at arm's length. "Because you screamed," he said finally, "and I heard you." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she wiped at them quickly, almost angry. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't want to involve anyone else. He came home drunk, and I said the wrong thing, and stop." Adrian kept his voice gentle but firm. "You don't apologize for what he did. Not to me, not to anyone." She nodded, but he could see she didn't believe it. Could see years of conditioning in the way she held herself, and how she apologized for existing. "Go clean up," he said. "I'll make coffee. Or tea, if you prefer." "You don't have to—" "I know, but I'm going to anyway." She studied him for a long moment, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Then she moved down the hallway toward the guest room, walking like every step hurt. Adrian went to his kitchen and stood there in the dark for a moment, his hands flat on the marble counter, breathing carefully. He could still hear Marcus's voice in his head, "She provokes me," and feel the cold fury that accompanied that particular brand of cowardice. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to Michael, his head of security. "Need a door replaced, 1604, tonight." The response came back immediately. "Problem? Handled. But I want someone on this floor for the next few days, discreet. Done." Adrian pocketed his phone and started the coffee maker. It was nearly 4:30 in the morning now, Tuesday. He had a meeting at 9 with the Castellano family about a shipping dispute, and another at 2 with his accountant about the casino acquisitions. A normal day in a life built on maintaining control of everything around him. Except now, there was a woman in his guest room with bruises on her face and trauma in her eyes, and Adrian was discovering that control was a hell of a lot more complicated when it involved another person's safety. The coffee finished brewing. He poured 2 cups, added cream to both because he'd noticed Elena drank it that way, had seen her in the building's lobby once, weeks ago, waiting for a delivery with a coffee cup from the shop downstairs. Adrian noticed everything. It was how he stayed alive in his line of work. Elena emerged from the guest room 20 minutes later. She'd changed into sweatpants and an oversized sweater that swallowed her frame. Her face was clean, the blood washed away, but the bruises looked worse now. The split in her lip had stopped bleeding but was swollen. "Coffee," Adrian said, pushing the cup across the counter toward her. She picked it up carefully, wrapped both hands around it. "Thank you for this, for everything." "You said that already." "I don't know what else to say." Then don't say anything. Adrian leaned against the counter, keeping distance between them. Just drink your coffee. They stood in silence for a while. Outside, the city was starting to wake up. Early morning traffic building, first light touching the tops of the buildings. I should probably explain, Elena said finally. You don't owe me explanations. I know, but... She paused, seemed to gather herself. Marcus wasn't always like this. When we first met, he was different, charming, attentive. We got married 6 months ago, and at first everything was good, or I thought it was good. But then little things started changing. He didn't like my friends, didn't want me working, said he made enough money, that I should focus on making our home nice. Adrian said nothing, just listened. I thought it was sweet at first, Elena continued, her voice getting smaller, that he wanted to take care of me. But then it became about control, what I wore, where I went, who I talked to, and when I pushed back, when I said I wanted to keep my job at the library, She stopped, took a shaky breath. He reminded me that I had nowhere else to go, that my parents are dead, that I don't have siblings, that my friends had all moved on with their lives. He was right. I didn't have anyone. So I stayed. And it got worse, so the criticism became constant. Then he started grabbing me when he was angry, then pushing. Tonight was the first time he actually... Her voice broke. Adrian set down his coffee cup carefully. How long has this been going on? 4 months, maybe 5. And you never told anyone? Who would I tell? She looked at him with those wounded eyes. The one friend I had left stopped calling because Marcus convinced me she was a bad influence. I quit my job. I don't talk to my neighbors because he said I was being too friendly, that people would get the wrong idea. I'm completely alone. Not anymore. The words came out before Adrian could stop them, and he saw Elena's eyes widen. You don't have to. I mean, I'll figure something out. I'll find a place tomorrow. I just need... Elena. He waited until she stopped talking. You're not going back to that apartment. It's not your responsibility to... I'm aware. Adrian held her gaze. But I'm also aware that if you go back there, he'll either convince you that tonight was your fault, or he'll put you in the hospital. Maybe both. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here until we figure out a better solution. I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. There's a difference. She stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. Like kindness without conditions was a concept she'd forgotten existed. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for a complete stranger? Adrian considered lying, giving her some noble reason that would make him sound like a better man than he was. But he'd built his entire life on understanding when to tell the truth and when to bend it. And right now she needed truth. Because I've spent my entire adult life around dangerous men, he said. I know what they look like. I know how they operate. And I know that the ones who hurt women are the absolute worst kind of coward. So no, I don't know you, but I know him. And that's enough. Elena's shoulders started shaking. She set down her coffee cup before she dropped it and pressed both hands to her face, crying silently. Adrian stood there feeling spectacularly useless. He could negotiate million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, could stare down mob enforcers and corrupt politicians. But a woman crying in his kitchen at 5 a.m. had him completely out of his depth. Sorry, she managed after a moment. I'm sorry, I just... Stop apologizing. He grabbed a box of tissues from the counter and set them next to her. You're allowed to have feelings about what happened. She laughed, but it came out broken. You sound like a therapist. I sound like someone who's paid a lot of money to therapists. Adrian picked up his coffee again. They're big on the whole acknowledge your feelings thing. That startled another laugh out of her, more genuine this time. She wiped her eyes, took a tissue. You go to therapy? Occupational hazard. Turns out running a business in morally gray areas requires occasional mental health maintenance. Elena looked at him curiously. What kind of business? The kind I don't discuss at 5 a.m. with people who've had traumatic evenings. He said it lightly, but she caught the deflection. Right, sorry, none of my business. Elena. He waited until she looked at him. Stop apologizing for asking normal questions. Actually, just stop apologizing in general. New rule. She nodded, but he could see the apology already forming on her lips. Years of conditioning. He wondered how long it would take to undo that kind of damage, then caught himself wondering at all. This was temporary. She'd stay a few days, figure out her next move, and then she'd go back to being a stranger he passed in the hallway. Except he didn't believe that anymore, and he wasn't sure why. You should try to sleep, he said. Guest room is yours as long as you need it. What about you? I don't sleep much. It was true. He ran on 4 hours a night, had for years. Too many things to keep track of, too many threats to monitor. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford. Elena finished her coffee and rinsed the cup in his sink, a small gesture that somehow felt significant. Thank you, Adrian, for everything. I know I keep saying it, but I mean it. I know you do. He nodded toward the hallway. Go get some rest. She paused at the entrance to the hallway. Will you still be here when I wake up? Something about the question, the vulnerability in it, the fear that he'd disappear like every other protection she'd ever known, made Adrian's chest tighten. I'll be here, he promised. She studied his face like she was memorizing it, then nodded and disappeared down the hall. He heard the guest room door close softly. Adrian stood in his kitchen and watched the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and amber. His coffee had gone cold. His phone was buzzing with messages he needed to answer. And somewhere 20 feet away, a woman he'd known for all of 6 hours was sleeping in his guest room, trusting him with her safety in a way that should have felt like a burden, but somehow didn't. His phone buzzed again. Michael. Door secured. Man on site. Anything else? Adrian typed back. Background check, Marcus Wright. Everything. How deep? Deep enough to know what we're dealing with. Done. Adrian pocketed his phone and poured the cold coffee down the sink. Tuesday was shaping up to be considerably more complicated than he'd anticipated. But as he glanced down the hallway toward the guest room where Elena was finally, maybe, feeling safe enough to sleep, he found he didn't mind the complication as much as he should have. Some screams you could ignore, but the ones you couldn't, those were the ones that changed everything. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting sensation of not knowing where she was. For 3 confused seconds, she thought she was back in the small bedroom of her childhood home before her parents died. Then the ache in her ribs reminded her, and everything came flooding back. Marcus's hands around her throat, the sound of Adrian's door crashing open, the quiet safety of his guest room in the early morning hours. She sat up slowly, testing her body's complaints. Her throat was tender, her cheek throbbed, and there was a deep bruise along her rib cage where Marcus had shoved her into the corner of the coffee table. But she was alive. She was safe. She was in a stranger's apartment wearing borrowed safety like an ill-fitting coat. The clock on the nightstand read 11:30. She'd slept for 6 hours, which was more consecutive sleep than she'd managed in months. At Marcus's apartment, she'd trained herself to sleep lightly, always listening for his footsteps, his mood, the particular quality of silence that meant danger. Elena stood and caught sight of herself in the mirror above the dresser. The bruise on her cheekbone had darkened to purple-black overnight. Her split lip was swollen. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd been hit. The visible evidence of what she'd been hiding for months. She found Adrian in the kitchen, dressed in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He was on his phone, speaking in low tones that suggested business. When he saw her, he held up one finger, wait, and finished his conversation. No, tell Castellano we'll meet his price on the waterfront property, but the timeline is non-negotiable. I want that deal closed by Friday. He paused, listening. Then make him understand that Friday isn't a suggestion. I'll handle the rest. He ended the call and pocketed his phone. Coffee? Please. Elena slid onto one of the bar stools at his kitchen counter, acutely aware of how out of place she looked in his sleek, expensive space. I should probably get out of your way. I'm sure you have work. Elena. His voice carried that same quiet firmness from last night. What did I say about apologizing? Right, sorry. I mean, she caught herself. That's going to take some practice. I noticed. He poured coffee into an oversized mug and slid it across the counter. There's food in the refrigerator if you're hungry. Help yourself to anything. She wrapped her hands around the mug. You're being incredibly kind to someone you barely know. I'm being decent to someone who needed help. That's not the same as kind. Adrian leaned against the counter across from her. How are you feeling? Sore? Confused? Grateful? She met his eyes. Scared. Of him or of the situation? Both. Elena took a sip of coffee, using it to buy herself time. I keep thinking he's going to come through that door, that this is just a temporary reprieve before everything goes back to the way it was. He won't come through that door. Adrian said it with such certainty that Elena almost believed him. I had my security team replace your door this morning and install additional locks, and there's someone monitoring this floor. She stared at him. You have a security team? I have a lot of things. He picked up his own coffee, most of which you don't need to worry about. That's not ominous at all. A smile ghosted across his face. I run several businesses. Some require more protection than others. The point is, you're safe here. Marcus would have to go through multiple layers of security to get anywhere near you. Elena wanted to feel reassured, but years of disappointment had taught her that safety was always conditional. He's my husband. Legally, he has rights. He has no rights that matter more than your safety. Adrian's voice went hard. And if he tries to assert otherwise, we'll deal with it. We. Elena repeated the word softly. You keep saying we, like this is your problem to solve. You're in my home. That makes it my concern. For how long? The question came out more desperately than she'd intended. I can't stay here indefinitely. I need to figure out what comes next. I need to find a place, get my job back, file for divorce. Her breathing quickened as the reality of her situation crashed over her. Oh God, I don't even know where to start. Start with breakfast. Adrian's calm cut through her rising panic. Then we'll make a plan. You have work. I heard you on the phone. You have meetings. I do, but they can wait an hour. He moved to the refrigerator and started pulling out ingredients. Eggs okay? Elena watched him crack eggs into a bowl with the efficient movements of someone who'd cooked for himself often enough to make it automatic. It was such a normal, domestic gesture that it felt surreal coming from a man who radiated the kind of controlled danger that made her think of apex predators. I don't understand you, she said quietly. Adrian looked up from whisking eggs. What's to understand? Why you're doing this? People don't just help like this. Not without wanting something. He was silent for a moment, and Elena braced herself for the reveal, for the moment when his kindness would come with conditions. But when he spoke, his voice was measured, honest. You're right that most people don't help without expecting something in return. But I'm not most people, and I don't need anything from you. He poured the eggs into a heated pan. I heard you scream. I responded. Everything after that is just logistics. Logistics? Elena tested the word. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. You need time and space to figure out your next move. I have both to offer. The complexity is what you're attaching to it. She wanted to argue, to point out all the ways this situation was anything but simple. But watching him cook breakfast in his expensive kitchen, his movements sure and unhurried, she found herself relaxing incrementally. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was so used to everything having hidden costs that she couldn't recognize genuine help when it appeared. Adrian plated the eggs with toast and set the food in front of her. Eat, then we'll talk about what happens next. The eggs were perfect, creamy, seasoned just right. Elena ate slowly, aware of Adrian watching her with that steady, assessing gaze that missed nothing. When's the last time you had a full meal? He asked. She had to think about it. Yesterday morning, I think. Marcus came home for lunch and was in a mood, so She stopped, hearing how it sounded, how she'd learned to make herself smaller, quieter, less present to avoid triggering his anger. You hid, Adrian finished. I avoided conflict, Elena corrected, but they both knew it meant the same thing. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, What did you do? Before Marcus decided you shouldn't work. I was a reference librarian at the downtown branch. I loved it, helping people find information, organizing collections, running the children's reading programs. Her voice softened with the memory. It sounds boring to most people, but I liked the order of it, the way everything had its place. It doesn't sound boring. It sounds like you valued structure and helping people. Adrian refilled her coffee. Why did you let him take that away? The question hit harder than he probably intended. Because he was right that I didn't need the money. And he made it sound like he was taking care of me, like wanting me home was about how much he valued me. By the time I realized it was about control, I'd already quit, already cut myself off from the people I worked with. She set down her fork. I made it so easy for him. He made it easy for you to trust him, then weaponized that trust. That's not the same thing as you making it easy. Adrian leaned back against the counter. Abusers are good at isolating their victims. It's a strategy, not a failure on your part. Elena looked at him curiously. You sound like you've studied this. I've studied people. How they manipulate, how they control, how they find and exploit weaknesses. He said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. It's useful in my line of work. Which is what exactly? Adrian smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Let's save that conversation for when you've had more than 6 hours of sleep and aren't processing trauma. That's the second time you've deflected that question. I'm aware. He picked up her empty plate. The answer isn't going anywhere. Before Elena could push further, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and something shifted in his expression, not quite tension but a sharpening of focus. I need to take this, he said. It's important. He moved into the living room and Elena heard him answer. Michael, what did you find? She couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Adrian's face as he listened, saw the way his jaw tightened, the muscle jumping in his cheek. How many complaints? Pause. And they didn't arrest him? Another pause, longer this time. Right. Of course not. He's too clean on paper. Adrian was silent for a moment. What about the medical equipment sales? Elena felt cold creep down her spine. They were talking about Marcus. Interesting. So the company doesn't actually exist. Adrian's voice went very quiet. Then where's the money coming from? She couldn't sit still anymore. Elena slid off the bar stool and moved closer, not bothering to pretend she wasn't listening. Adrian glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Send me everything. I want to know exactly who we're dealing with. He ended the call. What did you find? Elena asked. Sit down. I'd rather stand. Adrian studied her for a moment, then nodded. Marcus has a history. 3 ex-girlfriends filed restraining orders against him over the past 7 years. All of them dropped the orders within weeks. Elena's stomach turned. He told me I was his first serious relationship. He lied. He also lied about his job. Adrian's voice remained steady, factual, but she could hear the anger underneath. The medical equipment sales company he claims to work for dissolved 2 years ago. The paychecks he's been bringing home are coming from somewhere else. Where? We don't know yet, but it's enough money to lease a luxury apartment and a BMW, which means it's either legitimate income he's hiding or it's not legitimate at all. Elena sat down after all, her legs suddenly unsteady. You think he's involved in something illegal? I think he's a liar and an abuser who's been very careful about covering his tracks. The illegal income is just a theory, but it would explain why he's so paranoid about you talking to people, working outside the home, having any kind of independent life. Adrian moved closer. If he's hiding something serious, he needs you isolated and dependent. Oh, God. Elena pressed her hands to her face. I married someone I don't even know. You married someone who lied about who he was. That's on him, not you. She looked up at Adrian, this man who'd crashed into her life 12 hours ago and was now investigating her husband's secrets like it was the most natural thing in the world. Why are you doing this? The background check, the security, all of it. Because you can't make informed decisions without information. He said it simply, like it was obvious. And because men like Marcus count on their victims not having resources or support, I'm evening the odds. You're a stranger. So were you 12 hours ago. Now you're someone I'm choosing to help. People's relationships to each other can change that quickly when circumstances demand it. Elena wanted to cry or laugh or both. You're either the best person I've ever met or the most dangerous, and I honestly can't tell which. Probably both, Adrian admitted, but the danger isn't directed at you. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed again. He glanced at it and frowned. I need to go. Meeting I can't reschedule. Of course, I'll be fine here. Elena. He waited until she looked at him. Don't open the door for anyone. Don't go back to your apartment. If Marcus tries to contact you, don't respond. Just show me the messages. You think he'll try? I think he's a narcissist who just lost control of his primary target. Yes, he'll try. Adrian grabbed his jacket from the back of a chair. But he'll be testing boundaries first, seeing if you'll break. Don't give him that satisfaction. She nodded, though the thought of Marcus's inevitable contact made her feel sick. Adrian moved toward the door, then paused. There's a laptop in the office if you need it. Password is written on the sticky note on the desk. Make yourself at home. Adrian? She stood, suddenly not wanting him to leave. Thank you for everything, for treating this like it matters. His expression softened slightly. It does matter. You matter. Don't forget that. Then he was gone, and Elena was alone in his pristine apartment with nothing but her thoughts and the growing realization that she'd traded one form of dependence for another. Except this time, the person she was depending on actually seemed to care about her well-being. She spent the afternoon exploring Adrian's space in small increments, still feeling like an intruder despite his permission. The office he'd mentioned was lined with books, real ones, not just decoration. Philosophy, history, classic literature mixed with contemporary thrillers and business theory. She pulled out a worn copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations and found notes in the margins in Adrian's handwriting. Control what you can, accept what you can't. Know the difference. It felt like a window into who he was beneath the controlled exterior. Someone who thought deeply about power and restraint, about the ethics of action. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. She'd been ignoring it all morning, but when she pulled it out, her screen was full of notifications. 12 missed calls from Marcus, 23 text messages. Her hands shook as she opened them. The first few were apologetic. Elena, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. Please come home so we can talk. Then angry. You're my wife. You can't just leave. This is abandonment. Then manipulative. I know you're scared, but I love you. We can work through this together. That man doesn't care about you like I do. And finally, threatening. You think you can just walk away? You think some stranger is going to protect you? This isn't over. Not even close. Elena felt sick reading them. Felt the familiar pull of his words trying to drag her back into the narrative where she was the problem, where leaving was the betrayal, where his violence was somehow her responsibility. She took screenshots of everything and texted them to Adrian's number. He'd asked her to show him, and somehow that request, being believed, being protected, made it easier to resist Marcus's manipulation. Adrian's response came 5 minutes later. Don't respond to any of it. I'll handle this. She wanted to ask how, wanted to know what handling it meant in Adrian's world, but she was also afraid of the answer. The afternoon stretched long and quiet. Elena made tea, took a shower in the guest bathroom with its expensive toiletries and endless hot water, and tried to envision what came next. She needed to file for divorce, needed to find a job, needed to rebuild the entire life she'd let Marcus dismantle. But every time she tried to think more than a day ahead, her thoughts scattered like startled birds. Around 6, she heard the front door open. Adrian's voice called out, "It's me!" Elena emerged from the guest room where she'd been reading. How was your meeting? Productive. He set down his briefcase and loosened his tie. But more importantly, how are you? I got your texts from Marcus. I saw 23 messages in 6 hours. He's spiraling. What do we do? Adrian shrugged out of his jacket. We do nothing. I, however, am going to pay him a visit. Elena's stomach dropped. What? No, that's a terrible idea. Why? Because he's volatile and angry and... She stopped, hearing what she was about to say. That Marcus was dangerous. That confronting him could end badly. That she was worried about Adrian's safety. Except Adrian didn't look remotely worried. He looked calm and certain, like visiting her abusive husband was a minor inconvenience at worst. Elena, I appreciate the concern, but Marcus isn't a threat to me. He's a bully who preys on people who can't fight back. I can fight back. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. Something flickered in Adrian's expression. Surprise, maybe, or something softer. I won't. But we need to establish boundaries with him before this escalates further. He needs to understand that you're not alone, that continued harassment won't be tolerated, and that there are consequences for not backing off. And you're going to explain this to him? In terms he'll understand? Yes. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. What if that makes things worse? It won't. Men like Marcus respect power. Right now he thinks you're defenseless, which makes you a target. Once he understands you have protection, he'll recalculate. Adrian moved closer, his voice gentle. Trust me on this. I don't know if I can. Fair enough, you barely know me. He pulled out his phone and showed her a contact. This is Detective Sarah Chen. She's a friend, and she specializes in domestic violence cases. If anything happens to me, if Marcus retaliates in any way, you call her. She'll make sure you're protected. Elena stared at the number, at this contingency plan Adrian had made for the possibility that helping her might cost him something. You've really thought this through. I think everything through. It's how I stay alive. He pocketed his phone. But I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing. She searched his face, looking for doubt or hesitation and finding none. Whatever Adrian was, whatever dangerous thing made him so certain he could handle Marcus, it was bone deep and unshakable. Okay, she said finally. But please be careful. Always am. He headed for the door, then paused. There's food in the refrigerator. Help yourself. I'll be back in an hour. Adrian? He turned back. Why does it feel like you're going to do something I wouldn't approve of? He smiled, and for the first time it looked genuine and slightly dangerous. Because you're perceptive. Stay here. Lock the door. I'll be back soon. Then he was gone, and Elena was left staring at the closed door, wondering what exactly she'd set in motion by screaming loud enough for the wrong man, or maybe the right man, to hear. She paced Adrian's living room for 20 minutes before forcing herself to sit down. The windows overlooked the city, and she watched the lights come on as evening settled in, turning the skyline into something beautiful and cold. Her phone buzzed. Marcus again. I know you're at his place. I saw him leave. If you don't come home tonight, you'll regret it. Elena's hands shook as she read the message, as she realized Marcus had been watching the building, tracking Adrian's movements. The threat was clear, and it made her understand why Adrian had insisted on confronting him. This wasn't going to end on its own. Marcus wasn't going to let her go quietly. She typed out a response she knew she wouldn't send. I already regret marrying you. Then she deleted it and set the phone down. An hour became 90 minutes. Elena's anxiety ratcheted higher with each passing moment. She imagined Marcus attacking Adrian, imagined police showing up at the door, imagined every worst-case scenario her trauma-trained brain could conjure. When she finally heard Adrian's key in the lock, relief hit her so hard she felt lightheaded. He walked in looking completely unruffled, not a hair out of place. No visible injuries, no blood, nothing to suggest the confrontation had gone badly. Well? Elena demanded. What happened? Adrian poured himself a drink from the bar cart, expensive scotch in a crystal tumbler. We had a conversation. That's it? That's all you're going to tell me? He understands the situation now. He won't be contacting you again. How can you possibly guarantee that? Adrian took a sip of his drink, considering his words. Let's just say I made it clear that continued harassment would have professional and personal consequences he doesn't want to face. You threatened him. I gave him information and let him draw his own conclusions. Adrian's voice remained maddeningly calm. Sometimes the most effective threats are the ones you don't have to say out loud. Elena moved closer, studying his face. What did you tell him about who you are? About what you do? Enough to make him understand that you're not someone he can intimidate anymore. Adrian met her eyes. He thinks I'm connected, that bothering you would mean bothering people who can make his life very difficult. Are you? Connected? That's a complicated question with an even more complicated answer. He finished his drink. But the short version is that I have resources and relationships that Marcus doesn't want tested. That's all he needs to know. Elena felt like she was standing at the edge of something vast and dark, trying to see the bottom. You're not going to tell me what you really do, are you? Not tonight. Maybe not ever, depending on how long you stay. Adrian set down his glass. Some things are safer not to know. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be reassuring. It's meant to be honest. He moved past her toward the kitchen. Are you hungry? I could make dinner. The casual shift in topic would have been jarring if Elena hadn't been so exhausted. You just came back from threatening my husband and now you want to cook dinner? I find cooking relaxing and you need to eat. He pulled ingredients from the refrigerator. Pasta, okay? Elena wanted to push, to demand answers, to understand exactly who was protecting her and what price that protection might carry. But she was also tired and scared and desperately grateful that someone was finally standing between her and Marcus's violence. Pasta's fine, she said quietly. They fell into an oddly comfortable rhythm, Adrian cooking while Elena set the table, both of them moving around the kitchen like they'd done this before. It felt domestic and surreal, this temporary life she'd stumbled into. Over dinner, they talked about small things. Elena asked about the books in his office. Adrian asked about her favorite library programs. They avoided the heavy topics, the dangerous questions, the growing awareness that whatever was happening between them went beyond simple rescue. When Elena's phone buzzed again, they both tensed. But this time it wasn't Marcus. It was her bank, notifying her that Marcus had drained their joint account. Every penny, gone. She stared at the notification, feeling something crack inside her chest. He took everything. Adrian looked at the message over her shoulder. How much? $12,000. It was my savings from before we got married. I put it in our joint account after the wedding because he said, her voice broke. Because he said married people shouldn't have financial secrets. When did he drain it? 20 minutes ago, right after you left him. Adrian's expression went very cold, very still. Retribution. He couldn't hurt you physically, so he went for the next best thing. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I have nothing now. No job, no money, no... You have time and protection. The money will get back. How? Leave that to me. Adrian pulled out his phone and started typing. In the meantime, you're not to worry about finances. Anything you need, I'll provide. I can't ask you to... Elena. He looked up from his phone. You're not asking. I'm offering. And before you argue about pride or independence, remember that pride doesn't pay lawyers, and independence doesn't get you safely away from an abuser who's willing to financially destroy you. She hated that he was right, hated how quickly she'd become dependent on someone she barely knew. But she also recognized that Adrian was offering her something Marcus never had: agency. The choice to accept help without conditions, without control, without the expectation that she'd owe him something she couldn't afford to pay. Thank you, she whispered. Stop thanking me. But his voice was gentle. Just focus on getting through one day at a time. Tomorrow we'll start working on the divorce paperwork and getting your money back. Tonight you're just going to rest. Elena nodded, exhausted down to her bones. I think I'll go to bed. Good idea. Adrian stood as she did. Elena? One more thing. She paused at the entrance to the hallway. You're stronger than you think you are. What you did last night, screaming for help instead of staying silent, that took courage. Don't forget that. Something warm bloomed in her chest, fragile and terrifying. Good night, Adrian. Good night. She retreated to the guest room and closed the door softly behind her. Through the wall, she could hear Adrian making phone calls in that low, commanding voice that suggested he was calling in favors or issuing orders or doing whatever mysterious things he did when protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Elena crawled into the expensive sheets and stared at the ceiling, wondering how her life had changed so completely in less than 2 days. Wondering who Adrian Moretti really was beneath the careful control and quiet danger. Wondering if she was trading one cage for another, or if this, finally, was what freedom felt like. Her phone buzzed one last time. Not Marcus this time, but an unknown number. The message was simple. He won't bother you again, but stay vigilant. Men like him don't give up easily. A.M. Elena stared at the initials, at this secondary line of protection Adrian had established. Then she saved the number, turned off her phone, and let herself believe, just for tonight, that maybe she really was safe. 3 days passed in a strange suspension of reality. Elena existed in Adrian's space like a ghost learning to be solid again, navigating the careful balance between gratitude and guilt, between the safety he offered and the vulnerability of accepting it. She woke each morning to find coffee already made, breakfast ingredients laid out, and Adrian either gone to mysterious meetings or working in his office with the door half closed. They fell into an unspoken routine. She'd make herself breakfast while he worked. They'd have lunch together when he was home, conversations flowing easier each day as Elena slowly remembered how to talk without constantly monitoring for danger signs. Evenings, Adrian would cook dinner. He was surprisingly good at it. And they'd eat while discussing books or current events or anything except the two topics that hung between them like undetonated bombs: what Adrian actually did for a living and what would happen when Elena had to leave. On the fourth morning, Elena woke to voices in the living room. She pulled on her robe and cracked open the guest room door to find Adrian talking with a woman in an expensive pantsuit, their heads bent over documents spread across his dining table. The woman looked up when Elena emerged, her sharp eyes assessing in a way that felt professional rather than judgmental. She was maybe 40, with dark hair pulled into a severe bun and the kind of presence that suggested she didn't lose arguments often. "Elena," Adrian said, "this is Catherine Mills. She's a divorce attorney, one of the best." Catherine stood and extended her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "Ms. Wright, Adrian's told me about your situation. I'm here to help you navigate the legal process of ending your marriage and recovering your assets." Elena shook her hand, acutely aware that she was standing in a borrowed robe with pillow-creased skin while this polished professional discussed dismantling her life. "I don't know if I can afford—" "My retainer's already been paid," Catherine interrupted smoothly. "Your only job right now is to answer my questions honestly and completely. Can you do that?" Elena glanced at Adrian, who was watching her with that steady, unreadable expression. "You paid for a divorce attorney?" "I told you I'd handle the legal aspects." He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Catherine's the best at what she does, and you deserve the best representation." "Adrian, I can't let you—" "We've had this conversation." His tone was gentle but final. "You can pay me back later if it makes you feel better. Right now, what matters is getting you legally separated from Marcus as quickly and safely as possible." Catherine pulled out a chair. "Ms. Wright, why don't you sit down? I have questions about your marriage, your assets, and the abuse you've experienced. Some of it won't be easy to discuss, but everything you tell me is protected by attorney-client privilege." Elena sat, feeling the weight of what was about to happen settle over her. This was real. This was the beginning of the end of her marriage, the formal acknowledgement that the life she'd tried to build with Marcus was irreparably broken. Adrian excused himself, giving them privacy. Elena watched him go, grateful and terrified in equal measure. Catherine opened a leather portfolio and clicked her pen. "Let's start with the basics. How long have you been married?" 6 months. We got married in April." "And when did the abuse start?" Elena had to think about it, had to separate the gradual erosion of her autonomy from the first actual violence. The control started almost immediately after the wedding. The physical abuse began about 4 months ago. What forms did the physical abuse take? This was harder. Saying it out loud made it real in a way that living through it hadn't. Grabbing, pushing, he'd back me into corners when he was angry, squeeze my arm hard enough to leave bruises. 3 weeks ago, he slapped me for the first time. Last week, he shoved me into a wall. And 4 nights ago, her voice cracked. 4 nights ago, he choked me and was about to hit me when Adrian intervened. Catherine wrote quickly, her expression neutral, but her eyes sympathetic. "Did you ever seek medical attention for any injuries?" "No, they were never bad enough. Or I told myself they weren't bad enough." Elena twisted her hands in her lap. "I was ashamed. I didn't want anyone to know." "That's a common response, and it's not your fault." Catherine's voice was matter-of-fact, which somehow made it easier to hear. "What about witnesses? Did anyone else see the abuse or its aftermath?" "Adrian saw the bruises from that last night. And I think some neighbors might have heard us fighting, but I don't know their names. We'll work with what we have." "Now, about your assets. Adrian mentioned Marcus drained your joint bank account. Is that correct?" "Yes, $12,000. It was my money from before the marriage, but I put it in the joint account after we got married. Catherine made a note. We'll file for an emergency motion to freeze any remaining joint assets and demand return of those funds. Given the circumstances, the abuse, his depletion of marital assets as retaliation, we have a strong case. What other assets are there? The apartment is in both our names, but Marcus paid the deposit and most of the rent. I had a car before we got married, but he convinced me to sell it because he said we didn't need two vehicles. His car is in his name only. Do you have any evidence of the abuse? Photos, texts, emails? Elena pulled out her phone and showed Catherine the series of threatening messages Marcus had sent. Catherine's expression hardened as she read them. These are perfect. Threatening, controlling, and demonstrating a pattern of abuse. She looked up. I'm going to be frank with you, Ms. Wright. Your husband is not going to make this easy. Based on what Adrian's told me and what I'm seeing in these messages, Marcus is a narcissist who views you as property. He's going to fight the divorce, try to drag it out, use the legal system as another way to maintain control. Elena's stomach sank. How long will this take? In California, there's a mandatory 6-month waiting period before a divorce can be finalized. But we can file for legal separation immediately and get restraining orders in place within days. Catherine leaned forward. The key is documentation. Every time he contacts you, every threat, every attempt to manipulate or control, you document it and send it to me. We build an airtight case that protects you legally and financially. What about the money he took? We'll demand its return as part of the divorce settlement. If he refuses, we can pursue contempt charges. But I need to be honest. Getting money back from someone determined not to pay can be a long process. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. I worked for 3 years to save that money. It was supposed to be for emergencies, for security, and he just took it to punish me for leaving. I know, and we're going to fight to get it back. Catherine's voice softened slightly. But in the meantime, I need to know, do you have a safe place to stay? Resources to support yourself while this process plays out? She's staying here, Adrian said from the doorway. Elena hadn't heard him return. For as long as necessary. Catherine glanced between them, something calculating in her expression. Mr. Moretti has been quite insistent about your safety and well-being. That's good. You need people in your corner right now. She gathered her documents. I'll file the initial paperwork today and request an emergency restraining order. You should have it within 72 hours. In the meantime, do not contact Marcus. Do not respond to his messages, and if he shows up anywhere you are, you call the police immediately. Understood? Elena nodded. Thank you for everything. Thank Adrian. He's the one who called me at 7 in the morning, insisting this was urgent. Catherine stood and extended her hand again. I'll be in touch soon. Try not to worry too much. We have a strong case, and I'm very good at what I do. Adrian walked Catherine to the door, their conversation too low for Elena to hear. When he returned, he found Elena still sitting at the dining table, staring at the space where her future had just been mapped out in legal terms. You okay? He asked. I don't know. This is really happening. I'm really getting divorced. She looked up at him. How much is Catherine charging you? That's not your concern right now. Adrian, Elena. He pulled out the chair Catherine had vacated and sat down. I have more money than I know what to do with. Spending some of it to help you escape an abusive marriage is not a hardship. Stop worrying about the cost and start thinking about what you want your life to look like after this is over. She wanted to argue, to insist on paying him back, to maintain some semblance of independence. But the truth was, she had nothing. No money, no job, no home of her own. She was completely dependent on Adrian's generosity, and that terrified her almost as much as Marcus had. I need to find work, she said. I can't just live here indefinitely doing nothing. Can you? Adrian's tone was mild. Because from where I'm sitting, you're recovering from trauma, navigating a divorce, and learning how to exist without constantly monitoring for threats. That's not nothing. I need purpose, structure, something that's mine. Elena met his eyes. I appreciate everything you're doing, but I can't just be someone you're taking care of. I need to take care of myself. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Respect, maybe, or understanding. What did you have in mind? I want my job back. Or if not that job, then another one. I'm a librarian. It's what I'm good at. She felt her confidence growing as she spoke. I know I can't go back to the downtown branch where I worked before. Marcus knows where it is, knows my schedule. But there are other libraries, other positions. You'd be willing to start over somewhere new? I don't have a choice. My entire life needs to start over. The words came out harder than she intended, but they were true. Everything I built with Marcus was a lie. The marriage, the shared apartment, the life we were supposedly creating together, none of it was real. So yes, I'm willing to start over. I have to. Adrian was quiet for a moment, studying her with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see straight through to her bones. There's a private library, he said finally. Belongs to a colleague of mine who collects rare books. He's been looking for someone to catalog and maintain his collection. It's not a public library position, but the work would be similar. Elena's heart jumped. You think he'd hire me? I think if I recommended you, he'd at least give you an interview. Adrian pulled out his phone. The pay would be good, the hours flexible, and the location is secure. Marcus would have no way of knowing where you worked or when. Why would you do this for me? Because you just said you needed purpose and structure, and I happen to know someone who needs exactly what you're qualified to provide. It's not charity, Elena. It's connecting two people who could help each other. She wanted to believe him, wanted to accept this opportunity without overthinking it, but years of Marcus's manipulation had taught her to question kindness, to look for the hidden cost. What's the catch? She asked. No catch. Just a job if you want it. Adrian held her gaze. But I'm not going to force you to take it. If you'd rather find something else on your own, I'll support that too. Your choice. Your choice. Those two words held more weight than Adrian probably realized. For months, Elena had lived in a world where she had no choices, where every decision was made for her or manipulated until she chose what Marcus wanted. And now here was this man, this strange, dangerous, unexpectedly gentle man, offering her autonomy like it was the most natural thing in the world. I want the interview, she said quietly. If your colleague is willing to meet with me, I want the job. I'll set it up. Adrian stood. In the meantime, I need to go out for a few hours. Meetings I can't reschedule. Will you be okay here alone? I've been alone before. Not the same thing. His voice was gentle. If you need anything, call me. If Marcus tries to contact you, call me. If you just get scared or anxious or need to hear another human voice, call me. Understood? Elena nodded, something warm and terrifying blooming in her chest. Understood. After Adrian left, Elena spent the morning researching divorce procedures and restraining orders, trying to understand the legal maze she was about to navigate. The information was overwhelming. Forms to file, court dates to attend, assets to divide, a marriage to dissolve like it had never existed. Around noon, her phone buzzed. Not Marcus this time, but an unknown number with a local area code. Elena almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Elena Wright? The voice was male, unfamiliar, with a professional smoothness that set her on edge. Who is this? My name is Detective James Reeves. I'm calling about a complaint filed by your husband, Marcus Wright. He claims you've stolen property from your shared residence and are being held against your will by a man named Adrian Moretti. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Elena's blood ran cold. This was Marcus's next move, using the police as another weapon, another way to maintain control. I haven't stolen anything, she said carefully, and I'm not being held against my will. I left voluntarily after my husband attacked me. Mr. Wright claims the situation was a misunderstanding, that you left during an argument and are now refusing to return home or communicate with him. He's concerned for your safety. He choked me. Elena's voice shook with anger. He was about to beat me when someone intervened. If he's concerned for my safety, it's only because he's worried I'll press charges. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Miss Wright, are you saying your husband assaulted you? Yes, 4 nights ago. I have bruises and witnesses. Have you filed a police report? Not yet. I've been focused on filing for a restraining order and getting a divorce attorney. Elena paced Adrian's living room. but I can file one now if that's what's required. It would strengthen your case significantly. Detective Reeves's tone shifted slightly, less interrogative and more sympathetic. Ms. Wright, I need to ask, are you currently staying with Adrian Moretti of your own free will? Yes, completely. He's providing me with a safe place while I navigate leaving my husband. And you're aware of Mr. Moretti's business dealings? The question was loaded, dangerous. Elena chose her words carefully. I'm aware that he's a businessman with resources that are helping me leave an abusive situation. Beyond that, his private affairs are his own. Another pause. I see. Ms. Wright, I'm going to be straight with you. Your husband's complaint looks like harassment disguised as concern. But I needed to follow up to make sure you were actually safe. Are you? Safer than I've been in months. Good. I'd still recommend filing that police report and getting the restraining order in place as quickly as possible. Document everything, every contact, every threat. Build a paper trail. His voice softened. I've seen too many cases like yours. The ones who get out and stay out are the ones who take the legal protection seriously. Thank you, Detective. I will. After she hung up, Elena sat in the quiet of Adrian's apartment and felt the full weight of what Marcus was doing. He wasn't going to let her go quietly. He was going to use every tool at his disposal, the police, the legal system, financial pressure, emotional manipulation, to drag her back under his control. But this time she wasn't alone. This time she had Catherine's legal expertise, Adrian's protection, and her own growing determination to be free. She pulled out her phone and called Catherine, left a message about the detective's call and her decision to file a police report. Then she texted Adrian. Marcus filed a false police complaint. Detective Reeves called, handled it, but thought you should know. His response came immediately. On my way back. Don't talk to anyone else until I get there. 20 minutes later, Adrian burst through the front door with an intensity Elena hadn't seen before. His controlled calm had cracked slightly, revealing the sharp concern beneath. What exactly did the detective say? He demanded. Elena repeated the conversation word for word. Adrian listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. He's escalating, Adrian said when she finished. Using the police to locate you, to intimidate you, to see if you'd break under official questioning. It's a classic abuser tactic. The detective seemed sympathetic once I explained what actually happened. Some are, others aren't. Adrian pulled out his phone. I'm calling Detective Chen. She'll make sure any police reports get filed properly and that Marcus's false complaint is documented as harassment. You have a lot of useful contacts. I cultivate relationships with people who can be helpful in various situations. He hit dial and moved into his office. Elena heard the murmur of conversation, Adrian's voice dropping into that commanding tone that suggested he was calling in a favor. When he emerged 15 minutes later, his expression had softened slightly. Chen's going to meet you tomorrow to take your official statement about the assault. She'll also make sure the responding officers understand the context, that you're a domestic violence victim, not a missing person or a thief. Thank you. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. This is never going to end, is it? Marcus is going to keep finding new ways to make my life hell. Until the restraining order is in place and he faces actual legal consequences for violating it, yes, he's going to keep pushing boundaries. Adrian moved closer. But each time he does, he gives us more ammunition for the divorce proceedings. Every false police report, every threatening message, every act of financial retaliation, Catherine will use all of it to bury him in court. How long until I can just live my life without constantly looking over my shoulder? I don't know, but I can promise you won't be looking over your shoulder alone. The certainty in his voice made something crack in Elena's carefully maintained composure. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. Months of fear and isolation and trauma finally breaking through the numbness she'd built to survive. I'm sorry, she gasped. I'm sorry. I don't usually... Stop apologizing. Adrian's voice was gentle. You're allowed to fall apart. You've been holding yourself together through hell. It's okay to let go. But Elena couldn't stop. The sobs came harder, her whole body shaking with the force of emotions she'd suppressed for so long. She felt Adrian's hand on her shoulder, careful, asking permission. And then she was crying into his chest while he held her with surprising gentleness for someone who radiated such controlled danger. You're safe, he murmured. I've got you. You're safe. The word shouldn't have meant so much. He was still a stranger, still someone whose real life she knew almost nothing about. But in that moment, with his arms solid around her and his voice steady in her ear, Elena let herself believe it. She cried until she had nothing left, until the tears dried up and left her hollow and exhausted. Adrian didn't pull away, didn't rush her, just held her until she was ready to step back on her own. Sorry, she said again, wiping her eyes. I got your shirt all… Elena. He waited until she looked up at him. What did I say about apologizing? A watery laugh escaped her. That I need to stop doing it. Exactly. He guided her to the couch, made her sit down. Stay here, I'm making tea. I'm fine, you don't have to… The look he gave her was equal parts amused and exasperated. You just had a breakdown. You're allowed to not be fine. Sit, rest, let me do something useful. Elena sat, too wrung out to argue. She watched Adrian move around his kitchen with efficient precision, making tea like it was a military operation. When he brought her the cup, perfectly steeped, exactly the right temperature, she cradled it in both hands and felt something shift inside her. This man, this dangerous stranger who'd crashed through her door 4 nights ago, was taking care of her in a way no one had in years, maybe ever. Not with smothering control like Marcus, not with demands for gratitude or expectations of reciprocation. Just simple, genuine care offered because he'd chosen to offer it. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. Adrian sat down in the chair across from her. You can ask. I might not answer. Fair enough. Elena took a sip of tea, gathering courage. Why me? Why did you decide to help me specifically? You said yourself that you keep your distance from neighbors, that you value privacy and discretion. So why break that pattern for someone you didn't even know? He was silent for a long moment, and Elena thought he might deflect again. But when he spoke, his voice was honest in a way that felt like a gift. My mother, he said finally. She was in a situation like yours when I was a kid. Different details, same fundamental dynamic. A man who used violence to maintain control, a woman who had nowhere to go. She stayed because she thought she had to, because she believed she was protecting me by keeping the family together. Elena's breath caught. What happened? He put her in the hospital when I was 12. Fractured skull, broken ribs, internal bleeding. She almost died. Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless, but Elena could hear the carefully controlled fury beneath it. After that, we left. Moved 3 times in 2 years because he kept finding us. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed and housed. Never asked for help because she was too proud and too ashamed. Adrian, I'm so… Don't. He held up a hand. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because you asked why I helped you, and that's the answer. When I heard you scream, I heard her, and I couldn't walk away from that. Elena set down her tea with shaking hands. Where is she now? Your mother? Dead. Cancer took her 10 years ago. His expression softened slightly. But she lived long enough to see me make something of myself. Long enough to know she'd gotten out and stayed out. That matters. I'm sorry you went through that. It made me who I am. Adrian stood, moved to the window overlooking the city. Taught me that power without restraint is tyranny, that strength isn't about dominating others, that the measure of a man is what he does when no one's watching. He glanced back at her. My mother never got the protection she deserved, so when I heard you scream, I decided you would. The weight of that confession hung between them. Elena understood now why Adrian had been so certain, so unflinching in his protection of her. This wasn't about her specifically. It was about the woman he couldn't save, the childhood trauma he was still trying to make right. Thank you for telling me, she said softly. Thank you for asking. He turned back to the window. Most people don't really want to know. They prefer the comfortable version where I'm just naturally heroic instead of someone working out old ghosts. I think we're all working out old ghosts in one way or another. Some ghosts are more violent than others. Before Elena could respond, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. That was fast. My colleague with the library wants to meet you tomorrow afternoon. 2 o'clock work for you? Tomorrow? Elena's heart raced. That's so soon. He's motivated. Good librarians are hard to find, apparently. Adrian pocketed his phone. You don't have to take the meeting if you're not ready. No, I want to. I need to. Elena stood, feeling purpose solidify inside her. I need to start rebuilding my life, and that starts with work. Then tomorrow at 2, I'll take you to meet Vincent Castellano. The name rang a bell, something familiar and vaguely ominous. Castellano. Is he related to? Yes. Adrian's voice was carefully neutral. He's connected to certain business families in the city, but his book collection is legitimate, and he pays well. The job itself is exactly what I said it was. Elena processed this information, adding another piece to the puzzle of who Adrian Moretti was and what world he moved through. You run with interesting crowds. I run with useful crowds. There's a difference. He met her eyes. If you're not comfortable with the connection, I can look for other opportunities. But Vincent's offer is genuine, and his collection really does need proper care. She thought about it, about pride versus pragmatism, about the luxury of moral high ground when you had $12 in your wallet and no home to return to. I'll take the meeting. Good. Adrian checked his watch. I have a dinner meeting tonight. Business I can't reschedule. Will you be okay here? You keep asking me that. Because your safety matters to me. He said it simply, matter-of-factly. And because I know how easy it is to feel safe in someone else's space during the day, and then panic when night falls and you're alone. He was right, though Elena hated admitting it. The thought of spending the evening by herself in this beautiful apartment did make her anxious, made her think about Marcus somewhere out there, angry and unpredictable. I'll be fine, she said, because she needed to be. I have books to read and a police report to prepare for tomorrow. I'll keep busy. Adrian studied her face like he could read the lie beneath her words, but he didn't call her on it. I'll be back by 10. If you need anything before then, I'll call you. I know. Elena managed a smile. Go. Do your mysterious business things. I'll survive a few hours alone. After he left, the apartment felt simultaneously too large and too small. Elena tried to read, tried to watch television, tried to do anything that would quiet the anxious voice in her head insisting that Marcus was coming, that the safety she felt was temporary, that eventually Adrian would get tired of playing protector and she'd be alone again. Around 8, her phone buzzed. Marcus, from yet another new number since she'd blocked the previous ones. I saw the divorce papers. You really think you're going to walk away from me? From everything we built together? You're making a mistake, Elena. Come home and we can fix this. She stared at the message, at the manipulation wrapped in false concern. 6 days ago, she might have believed him. Might have convinced herself that she was overreacting, that his violence was her fault, that leaving was the real betrayal. But now, sitting in Adrian's apartment, with bruises still yellowing on her skin and Catherine's legal expertise in her corner, Elena saw Marcus's message for exactly what it was, a last desperate attempt to reassert control. She screenshotted the message and sent it to Catherine with the note. More documentation for the file. Then she blocked the new number and set down her phone. She was done responding, done explaining, done letting Marcus dictate the terms of her existence. Tomorrow she'd meet with Detective Chen and make the assault official. Tomorrow she'd interview for a job that could give her financial independence. Tomorrow she'd take another step toward the life she was building from the ashes of the one Marcus had tried to burn down. But tonight she'd sit in the quiet safety Adrian had provided and let herself believe that maybe, finally, she was strong enough to survive what came next. Adrian returned just before 10 as promised, carrying takeout containers that smelled like Thai food. He found Elena curled up on his couch with a book, though she'd read the same page 4 times without absorbing a word. Hungry? He asked, setting the containers on the counter. Starving, actually. She closed the book and joined him in the kitchen. How was your meeting? Productive, complicated, the usual. He pulled out plates and started dividing pad thai and spring rolls between them. Any more messages from Marcus? 1. Sent it to Catherine. Elena accepted the plate he offered. He's not going to stop, is he? Not until he faces real consequences. But that's coming. Adrian leaned against the counter, studying her. You look tired. I am tired. but also restless. It's a strange combination. She picked at her food. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this safety to disappear. That's trauma talking. Your brain's been conditioned to expect danger, so calm feels threatening. He said it gently, like he'd learned this lesson himself. It takes time to retrain those responses. They ate in comfortable silence, and Elena marveled at how natural this had become, sharing meals with a man she barely knew, existing in his space like she belonged there. It should have felt more awkward, more strained. Instead, it felt like the first real stability she'd known in months. I'm nervous about tomorrow, she admitted, both the police interview and the job meeting. Nervous is normal, but you'll do fine with Chen. She's good at her job and she'll make the process as painless as possible. And Vincent's interview will be more conversation than interrogation. Adrian finished his food and rinsed his plate. He's intense, but he respects competence. Show him you know libraries, and the job is yours. Well, what if he asks about my current situation? About why I left my last job? Tell him the truth, that you left an abusive marriage and you're rebuilding your life. Adrian's voice was matter-of-fact. Vincent's not going to judge you for that. If anything, it'll make him more inclined to hire you. He has strong feelings about protecting people who need protection. Elena wanted to ask more about Vincent Castellano, about what kind of man collected rare books and ran in Adrian's circles, but exhaustion was pulling at her, making her thoughts fuzzy and disconnected. I should sleep, she said. Big day tomorrow. Good idea. Adrian walked her to the hallway. Elena, you're going to be fine. Better than fine. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel that strength he kept insisting she possessed, but mostly she felt scared and uncertain and desperately grateful that someone believed in her enough to say it out loud. Good night, Adrian. Good night. The next morning arrived gray and cold, rain streaking the windows of Adrian's penthouse. Elena dressed carefully in clothes Adrian had taken her to buy 2 days earlier, professional slacks and a blouse that made her look competent rather than defeated. She covered the fading bruises on her face with makeup, though the evidence was still visible if you knew to look. Detective Sarah Chen arrived at 9 sharp. She was younger than Elena expected, maybe early 30s, with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put Elena at ease. Ms. Wright, Chen said, shaking her hand, thank you for agreeing to meet. I know this isn't easy. They sat at Adrian's dining table while Chen pulled out recording equipment and paperwork. Adrian excused himself to his office, giving them privacy but staying close enough that Elena could feel his presence like a safety net. I'm going to record this interview, Chen explained. Everything you say will become part of the official police record. Take your time, be as detailed as possible, and don't minimize what happened. Understood? Elena nodded, her throat suddenly tight. Let's start with the night of the assault. Walk me through everything that happened. Elena took a breath and began. She described coming home from the grocery store, Marcus already drunk and angry about something at work. The way his mood had deteriorated over dinner, how he'd accused her of undermining him, of making him look weak. The moment he'd grabbed her throat, the terror of not being able to breathe, the sound of Adrian's door crashing in. Chen listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When Elena finished, Chen asked specific questions about previous incidents, about the pattern of abuse, about Marcus's threats and controlling behavior. You mentioned he drained your joint bank account after you left. How much? $12,000, my savings from before we married. And he sent threatening messages since you filed for divorce? Elena pulled out her phone and showed Chen the screenshots. Chen photographed each one methodically. This is good documentation, Chen said. Very thorough. Your attorney's smart to have you save everything. She set down her camera. Ms. Wright, I'm going to be honest with you. Domestic violence cases are difficult to prosecute, especially when there's no hospital record of injuries. But you have several things working in your favor. Witness testimony from Mr. Moretti, photographic evidence of bruising, and a clear pattern of escalating abuse documented through texts and financial retaliation. What happens now? I file this report, and the district attorney's office reviews it for potential criminal charges. Assault and battery at minimum, possibly domestic violence enhancements given the circumstances. Chen leaned forward. But here's what I need you to understand. Pressing charges means Marcus will know you've officially involved law enforcement. It might make him back off, or it might make him escalate. You need to be prepared for either scenario. I have a restraining order hearing in 2 days. Good. That's the right move. Chen gathered her equipment. In the meantime, vary your routine, stay alert, and don't go anywhere alone if you can help it. Men like your husband often become most dangerous when they realize they're losing control permanently. After Chen left, Elena sat at the dining table feeling hollowed out. Recounting the abuse to an official recorder had made it real in a new way, not just her personal trauma, but a crime someone else might be punished for. Adrian emerged from his office with 2 cups of coffee. How are you holding up? I don't know. Relieved? Terrified? Both? She accepted the coffee gratefully. Detective Chen said Marcus might escalate once he finds out I filed charges. He might, but he'll also know that there are official eyes on him now, that crossing certain lines will have legal consequences. Adrian sat down across from her. Chen's good at her job. She'll make sure the report is airtight. She photographed my bruises. Asked about every incident I could remember. Elena's hands shook slightly. It felt like being examined, like I was evidence instead of a person. You're both, and I know that's uncomfortable. Adrian's voice was gentle. But it's necessary to build a case strong enough to protect you long term. Elena nodded, though the weight of what she'd set in motion pressed heavy on her chest. What time is the interview with Vincent? 2:00. We should leave around 1:30. He checked his watch. That gives you a few hours to rest and mentally prepare. But Elena couldn't rest. She paced Adrian's apartment, rehearsing answers to questions Vincent might ask, trying to remember everything she knew about rare book preservation and cataloging systems. Her mind kept jumping between the police interview and the upcoming job meeting, between the past she was trying to escape and the future she was desperately trying to build. At 1:15, Adrian knocked on the guest room door. Ready? Elena checked her reflection one last time. Professional, competent, only slightly terrified. Ready as I'll ever be. They drove through the city in Adrian's sleek black car, rain still falling in steady sheets. Elena watched the buildings blur past and tried to calm her racing heart. Tell me about Vincent, she said finally, beyond the fact that he collects rare books. Adrian navigated through traffic with easy confidence. Vincent Castellano is a businessman with diverse interests. He's in his late 50s, runs several legitimate enterprises, and has a genuine passion for literature. His collection includes first editions, historical manuscripts, and rare texts dating back to the 15th century. It's worth millions, and he's incredibly protective of it. And he's connected to organized crime. It wasn't a question. Adrian didn't insult her intelligence by denying it. His family has certain historical connections, yes, but Vincent himself operates mostly in legal territory these days. The book collection is his personal interest, separate from business. Mostly legal, Elena repeated. That's not exactly reassuring. I'm not going to lie to you about who Vincent is or what world he operates in, but I can promise you that the job is exactly what I described, cataloging and maintaining a private library. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous, just books. Adrian glanced at her. If you're uncomfortable, we can turn around. I'll find you something else. Lena thought about it, about her options, her resources, her pride versus her practical need for income and stability. No, I want this interview. I just want to go in with my eyes open. Fair enough. They pulled up to an estate that made Adrian's penthouse look modest. High walls, security gates, manicured grounds that stretched for what looked like acres. A guard at the gate checked their names against a list before waving them through. The house itself was massive, old money architecture with modern security systems visible at every corner. Adrian parked in the circular drive and led Elena to the front entrance, where another guard waited. Mr. Moretti, the guard said with a respectful nod. Mr. Castellano is expecting you in the library. They were escorted through rooms filled with expensive art and antique furniture, everything speaking to wealth accumulated over generations. Elena tried not to gawk, tried to maintain professional composure, even as her mind cataloged the obvious cost of everything around her. The library was on the second floor, and when they entered, Elena forgot to breathe. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined every wall, packed with books in leather bindings and protective cases. Reading tables sat strategically placed near windows that let in natural light. A rolling ladder allowed access to upper shelves. The smell of old paper and leather filled the air, familiar and comforting. It was the most beautiful room Elena had ever seen. Vincent Castellano stood from behind a massive oak desk, and Elena's first impression was of contained power. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that came from decades of making decisions that mattered. His suit was impeccably tailored, his handshake firm without being aggressive. "Ms. Wright," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that suggested Italian heritage. "Adrian speaks highly of you. Please sit." Elena sat in the chair he indicated, acutely aware of both men watching her. Adrian had moved to lean against a bookshelf, letting Vincent take the lead but staying close enough that Elena could feel his support. "Your collection is incredible," Elena said, because it was true, and because genuine enthusiasm was easier than false confidence. "Are these organized by acquisition date or subject matter?" "Currently by acquisition, which is part of the problem." Vincent gestured to the shelves. "I've been collecting for 30 years, and the system has become unwieldy. I need someone with expertise to reorganize, catalog, and maintain the collection properly." "What's your priority? Research accessibility or preservation?" "Both, ideally. These books should be protected for future generations, but they should also be usable. What good is knowledge if it's locked away?" Vincent pulled out a leather-bound volume and handed it to Elena. "Tell me what you see." She examined it carefully, noting the binding, the condition of the pages, the quality of the paper. "French. Early 19th century based on the typography and paper quality. The binding's been repaired, well done, but not original. Pages show some foxing, but overall good condition. Should be stored in climate-controlled environment with limited light exposure." She looked up. "You're testing me." Vincent smiled, and it transformed his severe features. "Adrian said you were competent. I wanted to verify." He took the book back carefully. "The position would be 30 hours a week, flexible schedule, $40 an hour to start. You'd work here in the library, with access to conservation resources as needed. The goal is a complete reorganization and cataloging system within a year, with ongoing maintenance after that." Elena did the math quickly. $40 an hour, 30 hours a week. That was $4,800 a month. Cheats. More than she'd made at the public library, more than enough to eventually afford her own place. "I'm interested," she said carefully, "but I need to be honest with you about my current situation. Adrian's already told me, you're leaving an abusive marriage and need a fresh start." Vincent's expression was matter-of-fact. "That's not a mark against you, Ms. Wright. If anything, it demonstrates courage. Not everyone has the strength to walk away." Elena felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "Thank you. That means more than you know." "I do know, actually." Vincent's voice softened. "My mother was in a similar situation when I was young. She stayed too long, paid a price for it. I learned early that leaving takes more courage than staying." He stood. "The job is yours if you want it. You can start Monday." "Monday?" Elena's voice came out higher than intended. "That's so soon." "Is that a problem?" "No, no problem at all. Thank you. Yes, I want the job." Vincent extended his hand again, and Elena shook it, feeling like she'd just been thrown a lifeline she desperately needed. "Adrian will handle the paperwork and logistics," Vincent said. "Welcome to the Castellano collection, Ms. Wright. I think you'll do excellent work here." They left the estate 20 minutes later, Elena's head spinning with the speed of everything. She had a job. A real job with good pay and meaningful work. For the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe without the weight of financial desperation crushing her chest. "Thank you," she told Adrian once they were back in the car, "for setting that up, for believing I could do it." "You did it yourself. I just made the introduction." He pulled out of the estate's driveway. "Vincent doesn't hire people to be nice. He hired you because you demonstrated competence and passion for the work." He was kinder than I expected. "Vincent understands loyalty and protection. He respects people who fight to survive." Adrian glanced at her. "You impressed him. That's not easy to do." Elena felt something warm bloom in her chest. Pride, maybe. Or the first fragile shoots of confidence. She had a job. She had legal representation. She had a place to stay while she figured out next steps. For the first time since leaving Marcus, the future looked like something she could actually build instead of just survive. Her phone buzzed as they drove. Catherine, restraining order hearing is scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll meet you at the courthouse. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours until she'd face Marcus in court and ask a judge to legally keep him away from her. The thought made her stomach twist with anxiety and anticipation in equal measure. Catherine says the hearing's tomorrow, she told Adrian. Good. The faster we get that order in place, the better. He navigated through afternoon traffic. I'll go with you if you want. Moral support.
You don't have to. Elena. His voice was gentle but firm. I know I don't have to. I'm offering because I want to be there. Your choice, whether to accept. She thought about walking into that courthouse alone, about facing Marcus across a courtroom with only Catherine beside her. Then she thought about Adrian's steady presence, the way he made her feel less alone in all of this. I'd like you there, she said quietly. If you're sure you don't mind. I don't mind. They drove in silence for a while, Elena watching the city scroll past. Rain was still falling, turning everything gray and blurred, but inside the car felt warm and safe, like a bubble of protection moving through uncertain terrain. Adrian? She turned to look at him. Why does this feel so easy? Being around you, accepting your help. It should feel more complicated. He was quiet for a moment, considering. Maybe because I'm not asking you to be anything other than yourself. No performance, no payment, no obligation beyond basic human decency. He glanced at her briefly before returning attention to the road. Or maybe because you're finally allowing yourself to trust someone after months of having that trust weaponized against you. Is that what you do? Make people feel safe so they trust you? Sometimes. Depends on the situation and what I need from them. His honesty was almost jarring. But with you, it's different. I'm not trying to manipulate your trust. I'm just offering it space to exist again. That's a very calculated way to describe kindness. I'm a calculating person, but that doesn't make the kindness less genuine. Adrian turned onto her street. No, his street. Elena still thought of the Meridian as Marcus's building, not hers. You're allowed to trust me without overthinking it, Elena. Not everyone who helps you wants something in return. She wanted to believe that. Wanted to accept his help without the constant anxiety that she was accumulating debt she couldn't repay. But years of Marcus's transactional affection had taught her that every kindness came with conditions eventually. When they arrived back at the building, Elena noticed a man in a dark suit standing near the entrance. He nodded at Adrian as they passed, and Adrian gave him a subtle gesture of acknowledgement. More security? Elena asked as they rode the elevator up. Just precaution. Tomorrow's hearing might make Marcus angry, might make him desperate. I'd rather be prepared. The elevator doors opened on their floor. Don't worry about it. Just focus on what you need to say to the judge. Inside the apartment, Elena's nervous energy had nowhere to go. She paced, reviewed the paperwork Catherine had sent, rehearsed her statement until the words blurred together. Adrian made dinner, something simple with pasta and vegetables, but Elena could barely eat. Her stomach was tied in knots, anxiety building with each passing hour. You should try to sleep, Adrian said after dinner. Tomorrow's going to be emotionally exhausting. I can't sleep. I'm too wound up. Elena abandoned her untouched food. What if the judge doesn't believe me? What if Marcus convinces them I'm lying? Catherine's good at her job and you have documentation. Photos, texts, police reports. The evidence is on your side. Adrian started clearing dishes. But I won't lie and say there's no chance the judge could rule against you. Family courts are unpredictable. That's not reassuring. It's honest. Which is what you need right now, not false promises. He rinsed plates, his movements methodical. But statistically, given your evidence and Marcus's pattern of harassment, you're very likely to get the order. Focus on that. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to feel confident about tomorrow. But fear had taken root in her chest, making it hard to breathe properly. I'm going to take a shower, she said. Try to relax. The hot water helped incrementally, washing away some of the day's tension. Elena stood under the spray and tried to envision tomorrow, walking into court, stating her case, asking for protection under law. It should have felt empowering. Instead,
It felt terrifying, like standing at the edge of a cliff and hoping someone had built a bridge she couldn't see yet. When she emerged from the bathroom in pajamas, she found Adrian in the living room with papers spread across the coffee table. He'd changed into comfortable clothes, jeans and a t-shirt that made him look younger, less intimidating. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. He looked up. "Work. Always more work." But he gathered the papers and set them aside. "You okay?" Nervous, scared, trying not to spiral into worst-case scenarios. Elena sat on the far end of the couch. "Tell me something that has nothing to do with tomorrow. Distract me." Adrian considered for a moment. "What do you want to know?" "Anything. Everything. You know all my secrets, my failed marriage, my professional history, my complete lack of financial resources, but I know almost nothing about you beyond the fact that you're mysteriously wealthy and well-connected." "What do you want to know specifically?" Elena pulled her knees to her chest. "What did you do before this? Before whatever business you run now?" "I grew up poor in Brooklyn. My mother worked 3 jobs after we left my father, barely kept us housed and fed. I learned early that money was the difference between safety and danger, between having choices and having none." His voice was matter-of-fact, relating history rather than seeking sympathy. "So I got good at making money. Started with small things, running errands for local businesses, fixing things people needed fixed. Then bigger things, investments, partnerships, building relationships with people who had what I needed." "When you say bigger things, do you mean illegal things?" Adrian met her eyes steadily. "I mean, I operated in gray areas where legality was negotiable and profit was certain. I'm not proud of everything I did, but I won't apologize for surviving." "And now?" "Now most of my businesses are legitimate. Real estate, investments, security consulting. I still have connections to less legitimate operations, but I'm more advisor than participant these days." He paused. "Does that bother you, knowing I'm not entirely on the right side of the law?" Elena thought about it honestly. A week ago, it would have. But a week ago, I was trapped in an apartment with a man who was slowly destroying me, and no one in my legitimate, law-abiding life noticed or cared enough to help. Then you crashed through my door and offered protection without judgment. So no, Adrian, it doesn't bother me that you operate in gray areas. It bothers me more that the people who should have helped didn't." Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. "You're more pragmatic than I expected. Trauma will do that. Strips away illusions about how the world actually works versus how we wish it worked." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Elena's anxiety gradually easing in the quiet of Adrian's presence. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and glittering. "Thank you," Elena said quietly. "For everything. For saving me, for protecting me, for believing I was worth the effort. Elena, you need to stop thanking me for basic human decency. It's not basic to me. Marcus made me believe I was worthless, that no one would ever help me, that I deserved everything he did to me. You proved him wrong." Her voice cracked. "That's not basic. That's everything." Adrian moved closer, closing the distance between them on the couch. "Marcus was a liar who used your isolation to maintain control. But that says everything about him and nothing about your actual worth." "How do you know?" "You barely know me. I know you left when staying would have been easier. I know you're fighting for your future instead of accepting defeat. I know you're capable of trust even after having it destroyed." His voice was soft but certain. "That's enough to know you're worth protecting." Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm so tired of crying." "Then stop apologizing for it and just cry." Adrian handed her a tissue. "Tomorrow you'll walk into court and face your abuser. Tonight you're allowed to be scared and sad and overwhelmed. Those things don't make you weak." She cried until she couldn't anymore, until exhaustion finally overrode anxiety. Adrian didn't try to fix it or minimize it, just sat beside her while she fell apart and pulled herself back together. When she finally stopped, Elena felt hollowed out, but somehow lighter, like she'd purged something toxic that had been building inside her. "I should sleep," she said hoarsely. "Big day tomorrow." "Get some rest. I'll be here if you need anything." Elena stood, then paused. "Adrian,
Will you really be there tomorrow at the courthouse? I promised, didn't I? People break promises. I don't. He said it with such certainty that Elena almost believed him. I'll be there. You won't face him alone. She wanted to say thank you again, but caught herself. Instead, she just nodded and headed to the guest room, carrying the fragile hope that maybe, finally, someone would keep their word. Sleep came eventually, fitful and full of anxious dreams. Elena woke twice in the night, heart racing, convinced she heard Marcus at the door. But each time, there was nothing, just the quiet hum of the city and the knowledge that Adrian was nearby, a wall between her and the man who'd tried to destroy her. When morning finally arrived, gray and cold, Elena dressed with shaking hands. Professional clothes again, makeup to cover the last traces of bruises. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Bruised, but standing, scared, but determined. Today she'd ask a judge to protect her. Today she'd prove that leaving Marcus wasn't just running away. It was running towards something better. Today she'd discover whether the law protected women like her, or whether Marcus's manipulation extended even into courtrooms where justice was supposed to matter. Elena took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked out to face whatever came next. Adrian was waiting in the kitchen with coffee and toast when Elena emerged. He took one look at her pale face and tight shoulders and simply nodded toward the counter. Eat something, even if it's just a few bites. You'll need the energy. Elena forced down half a piece of toast and drank the coffee like it was medicine. Her stomach was a knot of anxiety, but Adrian was right. She needed to function, needed to be present and coherent when she faced the judge. They left for the courthouse at 9, driving through morning traffic in tense silence. Elena watched the city pass by and tried to prepare herself for seeing Marcus again. It had been a week since that terrible night, and part of her hoped the distance had diminished his power over her. But another part, the part that had lived under his control for months, knew that seeing him would resurrect every fear she'd been trying to bury. Catherine was waiting on the courthouse steps, briefcase in hand and expression all business. She greeted Elena with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. Ready? Catherine asked. No, but I'm here anyway. That's all that matters. Come on, we're in courtroom 3. The courthouse was exactly as depressing as Elena had imagined. Fluorescent lights, scuffed linoleum floors, the particular smell of bureaucracy and broken families. They passed through security and made their way to the family court section, where people sat on benches looking variously angry, defeated, or grimly determined. Elena spotted Marcus immediately. He was sitting across the hallway with a lawyer she didn't recognize, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked like he specialized in making problems disappear. Marcus looked tired, his expensive clothes slightly rumpled, but when his eyes landed on Elena, they filled with something that made her blood run cold. Not anger, possession, like she was a thing he'd misplaced and was determined to reclaim. Adrian's hand touched her lower back, steady and grounding. Don't look at him. Look at me. Elena forced her gaze away from Marcus and focused on Adrian's face. Calm, certain, absolutely unafraid. He can't hurt you here, Adrian said quietly. Too many witnesses, too much official oversight. And after today, he won't be able to hurt you anywhere. Catherine led them into the courtroom. It was smaller than Elena expected, with wooden benches and a judge's bench that dominated the space. They sat on one side, Marcus and his lawyer on the other. The physical distance should have made Elena feel safer, but she could feel Marcus's eyes on her, could sense the rage radiating from him like heat. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Patricia Hendricks entered, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and the weary expression of someone who'd seen too many cases exactly like this one. Case number 2025-DV-7834, the bailiff announced. Elena Wright versus Marcus Wright, petition for emergency restraining order. Judge Hendricks reviewed the file briefly, then looked up. Ms. Mills, you're representing the petitioner? Catherine stood. Yes, Your Honor. We're asking for an immediate restraining order based on domestic violence, documented threats, and ongoing harassment. Mr. Brennan? The judge looked at Marcus's lawyer. He stood smoothly. Your Honor, my client denies all allegations of abuse.
This petition is based on a misunderstanding during a marital dispute, and we believe Miss Wright has been unduly influenced by a third party with questionable motives. Elena felt her stomach drop. They were going to make this about Adrian, about her judgment, about anything except what Marcus had actually done. "We'll hear testimony from both parties," Judge Hendricks said. "Ms. Wright, please approach and be sworn in." Elena's legs felt like water as she walked to the witness stand. The bailiff swore her in, and she sat down with her hands folded tightly in her lap to hide the shaking. Catherine approached with gentle confidence. "Ms. Wright, can you describe what happened on the night of October 28th? Elena took a breath and forced herself to speak clearly. "My husband came home intoxicated and angry about something that happened at work. During dinner, he became verbally abusive, accusing me of various things. When I tried to leave the room, he grabbed me and pushed me against the wall. Then he put his hands around my throat and started choking me." "What happened next?" "My neighbor, Adrian Moretti, heard me scream and broke down the door. He intervened and helped me leave the apartment safely." "Had your husband been physically violent before that night?" "Yes. It started about 4 months into our marriage with grabbing and shoving. It escalated over time to slapping and pushing me into furniture. That night was the worst it had been." Catherine pulled out photographs. "These photos were taken the morning after the assault. Can you identify what we're seeing?" Elena looked at the images of her bruised face and throat. "Those are bruises from where Marcus choked me and hit me against the wall. Your Honor, I'd like to submit these photographs as evidence, along with the police report filed by Detective Sarah Chen of the Domestic Violence Unit." Judge Hendricks accepted the documents and reviewed them carefully. Elena watched her face, trying to read her reaction, but the judge remained professionally neutral. "Ms. Wright," Catherine continued, "what happened after you left your apartment that night?" "I stayed with Adrian Moretti while I filed for divorce and arranged legal representation. During that time, Marcus drained our joint bank account of $12,000 and sent me numerous threatening messages." Catherine submitted the bank records and text message screenshots. "Your Honor, you'll see a clear pattern of financial retaliation and escalating threats, including messages that arrived as recently as 3 days ago." Marcus's lawyer stood. "Objection, Your Honor. These text messages show a concerned husband trying to communicate with his wife, not threats." Judge Hendricks read through the messages with raised eyebrows. "Mr. Brennan, I'm seeing multiple messages that say things like, 'You'll regret this,' and 'This isn't over.' That reads as threatening to me. My client was emotional and concerned for his wife's safety. Your client was attempting to intimidate Mrs. Wright into returning to an abusive situation." The judge's voice was crisp. "Objection overruled. Continue, Ms. Mills." Catherine nodded. "Ms. Wright, are you afraid of your husband?" "Yes." Elena's voice cracked. "I'm afraid he'll hurt me again. I'm afraid he won't accept that I'm leaving. I'm afraid of what he might do if he finds me alone." "Thank you. No further questions." Marcus's lawyer approached the stand, and Elena's entire body tensed. This was the part she'd been dreading, the cross-examination designed to make her look unreliable or dishonest. "Ms. Wright," Brennan said in an oily voice, "isn't it true that you willingly married my client just 6 months ago?" "Yes." "And isn't it true that during those 6 months, you lived together peacefully until this supposed incident?" "No, that's not true. The abuse started within weeks of the wedding and escalated over time." "But you never reported it to police, never sought medical attention, never told anyone what was happening. Isn't that correct?" Elena forced herself to meet his eyes. "That's common in domestic violence situations. Victims are often isolated and ashamed, afraid they won't be believed. Or perhaps there was nothing to report because nothing actually happened." Brennan's smile was condescending. "Isn't it true that you left your husband not because of abuse, but because you developed a relationship with Adrian Moretti, a man with known criminal connections?" "That's completely false." "Your Honor," Catherine interjected sharply. "Counsel is testifying instead of questioning. Mr. Moretti's background is irrelevant to whether Miss Wright was abused by her husband." "Sustained. Mr. Brennan, stick to relevant questions." Brennan changed tactics. "Ms. Wright, you claim my client choked you.
Yet you didn't seek medical attention that night or file a police report until 6 days later. Why the delay if you were truly in fear for your life? I was in shock. I was focused on getting to safety and figuring out what to do next. I filed the report as soon as Detective Chen could meet with me. Convenient timing, just days before this restraining order hearing. Brennan's voice dripped skepticism. Isn't it true that you're fabricating these allegations to gain advantage in your divorce proceedings? No. Elena's voice was steady despite the tears threatening to fall. Everything I've said is true. Marcus abused me for months, and I finally found the courage to leave. Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness. Elena returned to her seat on shaking legs. Adrian's hand found hers under the table, steady and warm. She held on like a lifeline. Mr. Wright, Judge Hendricks said, please approach and be sworn in. Elena watched Marcus take the stand, watched him arrange his features into an expression of wounded confusion. He looked smaller somehow, less intimidating under the formal scrutiny of the court. Brennan led him through his version of events. The marriage had been happy. Elena had seemed content. The night in question was a simple argument that got out of hand. He never meant to hurt her. He was deeply sorry and just wanted his wife back. It was a masterful performance. Elena could see how someone who didn't know better might believe him, might think this was just a tragic misunderstanding between two people who loved each other. Then Catherine stood for cross-examination, and the careful mask Marcus wore began to crack. Mr. Wright, you testified that you never meant to hurt your wife. Is that correct? Yes, I love Elena. I would never intentionally harm her. Yet you admit to putting your hands on her throat during an argument? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I was trying to get her attention. I didn't realize I was hurting her. You didn't realize that choking someone would hurt them? Catherine's tone was razor sharp. Mr. Wright, you're an educated man. Are you really claiming ignorance about basic physiology? I wasn't thinking clearly. I'd been drinking. So you were intoxicated when you assaulted your wife? It wasn't assault. What would you call putting your hands around someone's throat without their consent? Marcus's face reddened. It was a mistake. I apologized. When did you apologize? Before or after you drained your joint bank account of all your wife's savings? That money was marital property. That money was Ms. Wright's premarital savings that she deposited into a joint account after you convinced her married couples shouldn't have financial secrets. You took it as punishment for her leaving, didn't you? I took what was mine. $12,000 that your wife saved over 3 years was yours? Catherine's voice was deadly calm. Mr. Wright, please explain to the court how her money became yours the moment she tried to leave your abuse. I wasn't abusing her. Marcus's composure finally shattered. She was the one who provoked me, who pushed my buttons, who made me... He stopped, realizing too late what he'd admitted. Catherine pounced. Who made you what, Mr. Wright? Who made you put your hands on her? Who made you choke her? I didn't mean... That's not what I... Marcus looked desperately at his lawyer. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Hendricks reviewed her notes while Marcus returned to his seat, looking shaken. Elena could see the calculation in his eyes, the realization that his carefully constructed story had fallen apart under scrutiny. Does either party have additional witnesses? The judge asked. The petitioner calls Adrian Moretti, Catherine said. Adrian took the stand with the same controlled calm he brought to everything. He was sworn in and sat down, his expression neutral but his eyes hard when they landed on Marcus. Catherine walked him through his testimony, hearing Elena's scream, breaking down the door, finding Marcus choking her, helping her to safety. His account was clear, detailed, and completely damning. When Brennan tried to cross-examine, suggesting that Adrian had ulterior motives for helping Elena, Adrian's response was measured and devastating. My motive was preventing a woman from being killed by her husband, Adrian said flatly. If you find that suspicious, I'd suggest examining your own moral compass. The courtroom was silent for a beat. Then Judge Hendricks cleared her throat. Any other witnesses? No, Your Honor, both lawyers said. The judge took a moment to review all the evidence, photos, texts, bank records, police reports, testimony. Elena held her breath,
waiting for the decision that would determine whether she'd have legal protection or whether Marcus would remain a constant threat. Based on the evidence presented, Judge Hendricks said finally, I find that Ms. Wright has demonstrated clear and convincing proof of domestic violence and ongoing threat. Mr. Wright's testimony was inconsistent and, frankly, revealed exactly the kind of victim blaming that characterizes abusive behavior. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. I'm granting the emergency restraining order, the judge continued. Mr. Wright is prohibited from contacting Ms. Wright directly or indirectly, from coming within 500 feet of her person or residence, and from any further harassment or intimidation. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. She looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Wright, I'm also ordering you to return the $12,000 you removed from the joint account within 30 days. Consider yourself fortunate I'm not holding you in contempt right now. Marcus stood abruptly. This is insane. She's my wife. You can't just... Mr. Wright, sit down or I'll have you removed from my courtroom. Judge Hendricks's voice cut through his outburst like steel. And for the record, Ms. Wright won't be your wife much longer. I'm fast-tracking your divorce proceedings given the circumstances. You'll be officially separated within 90 days instead of the standard waiting period. Marcus's lawyer pulled him back into his seat, whispering urgently. Marcus's face was red with fury, but he stayed silent. This hearing is adjourned. The restraining order is effective immediately. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel. Elena couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The restraining order was granted. Marcus couldn't legally contact her or come near her. The divorce would be finalized in 3 months instead of 6. She'd won. Catherine was talking to her, explaining next steps and legal procedures, but Elena barely heard it. She was focused on Marcus being led out of the courtroom by his lawyer, the look he shot her over his shoulder, pure hatred mixed with disbelief that she'd actually done this. Then Adrian's hand was on her shoulder, grounding her in reality. Let's get out of here. They left through a side exit Catherine recommended, avoiding the main hallway where Marcus might be waiting. In the car, Elena finally let herself fall apart, crying so hard she couldn't catch her breath. It's over, she gasped between sobs. It's really over. The legal part is, Adrian said carefully. But Elena, you need to stay vigilant. Men like Marcus don't always respect court orders, especially not immediately. He's humiliated and angry, which makes him unpredictable. You think he'll violate the restraining order? I think he might try. Which is why security stays in place, why you don't go anywhere alone, why we take this seriously until he accepts that you're truly gone. Elena nodded, wiping her eyes. I have to start work Monday. At Vincent's library. I know, and you will. We'll just make sure you get there and back safely. Adrian pulled into traffic. For now, let's go home and let you decompress. You've been through enough today. Home. He'd said home like she belonged there, like his penthouse was a shared space rather than temporary shelter. Elena wanted to call him on it, to remind him this was just until she could afford her own place, but she was too exhausted to argue, and truthfully, Adrian's apartment felt more like home than anywhere she'd lived with Marcus. They spent the rest of the day in quiet companionship. Adrian worked in his office while Elena read in the living room, both of them existing in the same space without needing to fill it with conversation. It felt peaceful in a way Elena had forgotten was possible, being with someone without having to perform or monitor or brace for sudden violence. That evening, as they ate dinner together, Elena's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Her stomach clenched automatically, but when she opened it, the message was from Detective Chen. Congratulations on the restraining order. Note that Marcus Wright was arrested at 6 p.m. this evening for attempting to access your former shared apartment in violation of the order. He posted bail an hour ago, but has been formally warned that additional violations will result in extended jail time. Elena showed the message to Adrian, her hands shaking. Less than 8 hours, Adrian said, his voice deadly quiet. He lasted less than 8 hours before violating the order. What does this mean? It means he's desperate and stupid, which is a dangerous combination. It also means the police are taking this seriously, which works in your favor. Adrian pulled out his phone. I'm increasing security. No chances, no assumptions that he'll suddenly become rational. Elena watched him make calls, watched him build layers of protection around her with the same careful precision he brought to everything. Part of her wanted to protest, to insist she didn't need all this, that she could handle things herself. But the larger part, the part that had felt Marcus's hands around her throat, was desperately grateful. Over the next few days, a new routine emerged. Adrian's driver took Elena to Vincent's library each morning and picked her up each afternoon. She spent her days cataloging rare books and creating organizational systems, losing herself in work that felt meaningful and absorbing. Vincent was a thoughtful employer, giving her space to work independently while offering guidance when she needed it. The library became a sanctuary. Elena found peace in the quiet organization of knowledge, in the careful preservation of centuries-old texts, in the creation of systems that would outlast all of them. It was the opposite of the chaos Marcus had created in her life. Ordered, purposeful, permanent. Marcus was arrested twice more in the first 2 weeks for attempting to contact Elena, once through a fake email account, once by showing up at the Meridian and demanding security let him access the 16th floor. Each arrest strengthened the case against him, made the restraining order harder to violate, pushed the divorce proceedings faster. Catherine called 3 weeks after the hearing with an update. Marcus's lawyer reached out. They want to settle. Settle what? Elena asked, phone pressed to her ear while she worked in Vincent's library. Everything. He'll agree to the divorce without contest, return your $12,000, and relinquish any claim to marital assets in exchange for you agreeing not to press additional criminal charges for the restraining order violations. Elena thought about it. Part of her wanted to see Marcus punished for everything he'd done, wanted him to face real consequences beyond court orders and legal fees. But another part just wanted it over, wanted to be free of him completely and permanently. What do you recommend? Take the deal, Catherine said without hesitation. You get your money back, you get divorced faster, and you avoid the uncertainty of a trial. Marcus gets to save face by not having a criminal record. Everyone walks away. When would the divorce be final? 6 weeks if he signs the papers this week. You'd be legally free of him by New Year's. 6 weeks. Less than 2 months until she'd be Elena Wright again. Not Elena Wright married to Marcus, just Elena. The thought made her feel lighter than she had in months. Okay, she said. I'll take the settlement. Smart choice. I'll draw up the papers. Elena hung up and sat in Vincent's beautiful library, surrounded by centuries of collected knowledge, and felt the future opening up before her like a door she'd thought was permanently locked. That evening, she told Adrian about the settlement over dinner. Good, he said. Clean break, minimal ongoing entanglement. That's the best outcome. I'll be able to pay you back soon, for the lawyer fees, for letting me stay here, for everything. Adrian set down his fork. Elena, we've had this conversation. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. My safety, my job, my ability to leave Marcus. All of it happened because you helped me. No. It happened because you were brave enough to scream when you needed help, and strong enough to accept it when it came. His voice was firm. I was just the person who happened to hear you. Anyone else would have done the same. That's not true, and you know it. Most people would have ignored me, would have decided it wasn't their problem. Elena leaned forward. You chose to help. You chose to keep helping even when it complicated your life. That means something. It means I'm not a complete bastard despite what some people think. Adrian smiled slightly. But it doesn't mean you owe me anything beyond basic human courtesy. They finished dinner in comfortable silence, but the conversation stayed with Elena. She'd come to care about Adrian in ways that went beyond gratitude, beyond the crisis that had thrown them together. He'd become her friend, her confidant, her safe harbor in ways she hadn't expected or planned for. And that terrified her almost as much as Marcus had, because trusting someone after trauma felt like handing them a loaded weapon and hoping they wouldn't use it. The weeks passed in a blur of work and healing. Elena threw herself into Vincent's collection, creating a comprehensive cataloging system that the older man praised effusively. Her first paycheck was enough to start looking at small studio apartments, enough to envision independence. But when she mentioned apartment hunting to Adrian, his response was unexpected. You don't have to rush into finding a place, he said carefully. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need to. Adrian, I can't live in your guest room forever. Why not? It's not like I use the space for anything else. He was cooking dinner, his back to her, voice carefully casual. And honestly, I've gotten used to having you around. Elena felt her heart skip. What does that mean? He turned to face her, and something in his expression was different, more open, more vulnerable than she'd seen before. It means the apartment feels empty when you're not here. It means I like our dinners together and our conversations, and the way you've reorganized my books by subject matter, even though I never asked you to. Adrian, I'm not asking you to stay out of obligation or because you can't afford to leave. I'm asking because I want you here. He set down the spatula. But if you need your own space, if staying here feels too much like another form of dependence, I understand. I'll help you find a place, and we'll figure out how to stay friends. Elena's mind raced. She'd been so focused on rebuilding independence that she hadn't stopped to ask herself what she actually wanted. And the truth was, she didn't want to leave. Didn't want to lose the quiet comfort of Adrian's presence, the safety of his space, the growing connection between them that felt like something real and chosen rather than born from crisis. I don't want to leave, she admitted quietly, but I'm scared of what that means. What are you scared of specifically? That I'm just replacing one form of dependence with another. That I'm not actually healing, just finding a different person to rely on. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. Marcus controlled me through fear and isolation. What if I'm letting you control me through kindness? Adrian moved closer, his expression serious. Elena, look at me. Really look at me. She met his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the careful concern. I don't want to control you, he said quietly. I want you to have every choice, every option, every bit of freedom you were denied. If you stay here, it's because you choose to, not because you have to. You have a job, you have money, you have legal protection. You could walk out that door right now and build a completely independent life, and I'd support that decision. Then why do you want me to stay? Because somewhere between crashing through your door and now, you became important to me, not as a project or a responsibility, but as a person I genuinely care about. His voice was steady, honest. I like who I am when you're around. I like the life we've accidentally built together, and I'd like to see where that could go if we gave it a real chance. Elena's breath caught. This was it, the moment where she could choose safety through distance or risk trusting someone again. Every instinct trained by trauma screamed at her to protect herself, to run before he could hurt her. But Adrian wasn't Marcus. He'd never demanded anything from her, never tried to control her choices, never made his help conditional on her compliance. He'd offered protection and then proved it was real by consistently respecting her autonomy. I'd like that too, she whispered. I'm terrified, but I'd like to see where this goes. The smile that crossed Adrian's face was genuine and unguarded, and Elena realized she'd rarely seen him smile like that, without calculation, without control, just pure honest feeling. Then stay, he said, for as long as it feels right. And the moment it doesn't, you walk away. No guilt, no obligation, just honest choice. Elena nodded, feeling something tight in her chest finally loosen. Okay, I'll stay. The next few weeks felt like learning to breathe again. Elena continued working at Vincent's library, continued seeing Catherine for legal updates, continued building a life that was entirely her own. But she came home each evening to Adrian's apartment. To their apartment, she was starting to think of it. And the growing sense that maybe she could trust this, could trust him, could trust herself to know the difference between safety and control. The divorce was finalized on a gray December morning. Elena signed the papers in Catherine's office, and just like that, she was free. No longer Marcus's wife, no longer bound to the man who'd tried to destroy her. Just Elena, single and starting over at 26 with nothing but a job she loved and a future she was building one careful choice at a time. How does it feel? Catherine asked after the papers were filed. Elena thought about it honestly. Lighter, like I can finally exhale after holding my breath for months. Good, that's how it should feel. Catherine handed her a check. From Marcus. Your $12,000 plus interest as specified in the settlement. Elena stared at the check, at the money Marcus had stolen as punishment now returned with additional payment for the harm he'd caused. It felt like vindication, like proof that she'd been right to leave,
right to fight, right to believe she deserved better. She called Adrian from Catherine's office. "It's done. I'm divorced. Congratulations." She could hear the smile in his voice. "How are you feeling?" "Free, terrified, hopeful, all of it at once. Want to celebrate? I'll take you to dinner anywhere you want." Elena thought about all the expensive restaurants Adrian probably frequented, all the places she'd never been able to afford. "Actually, I just want to come home and cook dinner together. Is that okay?" "More than okay. I'll pick up groceries. Text me what you want to make." Home. She'd said it without thinking, and Adrian had accepted it without question. This was her home now, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she'd chosen it, chosen him, chosen the life they were building together from the wreckage of what Marcus had tried to destroy. That evening, they cooked together in Adrian's kitchen, Elena's kitchen too now, she supposed. They made pasta from scratch, argued good-naturedly about the proper way to season sauce, drank wine, and laughed, and existed in the comfortable intimacy of people who'd chosen each other deliberately. After dinner, sitting on the couch with the city lights spreading out below them, Adrian took Elena's hand. "I have something to tell you," he said carefully, "and I want you to know you can say no to any of it without it changing anything between us." Elena's heart raced. "Okay." "I'm transferring ownership of this apartment to both our names, equal ownership, legal documentation, everything." He squeezed her hand. "I don't want you to ever feel trapped here, like you can't leave because you have nowhere to go. This place is yours as much as mine, and it stays yours whether we stay together or not." Elena stared at him, overwhelmed. "Adrian, that's too much." "It's not. It's making sure you always have a safe place to land, always have security, always have the freedom to choose rather than being forced by circumstances." His expression was serious, earnest. "I never want you to feel with me the way you felt with Marcus. Trapped, dependent, without options. This is me proving that you always have options, always have power, always have a home that's truly yours." Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. "Why would you do this?" "Because I love you." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I've loved you since you cried in my kitchen at 5 a.m. and apologized for existing. I love your strength and your vulnerability and the way you've rebuilt yourself from nothing. And I want to spend whatever time you'll give me proving that love doesn't have to mean control, that protection doesn't require surrender, that you can be cherished without being owned." Elena's entire world narrowed to this moment, this man, this declaration that felt like everything she'd needed to hear but never thought she'd find. "I love you too," she whispered. "I'm terrified of it, but I do." Adrian pulled her close, and Elena let herself be held, let herself believe that maybe, finally, she'd found someone who understood that real love was about freedom, not possession. They kissed for the first time that night, slow and careful, both of them treating the other like something precious that might break if handled roughly. It was nothing like the aggressive, demanding affection Marcus had provided. This was gentle and questioning, a conversation in physical form, a promise that they'd build this together at whatever pace Elena needed. When they finally pulled apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "We'll do this at your speed. No pressure, no expectations. Just us figuring it out together." "Thank you," Elena breathed, "for everything, for hearing me scream, for not looking away, for showing me what it feels like to be chosen instead of controlled. You were always worth choosing, Elena. It just took the right person to recognize it." The months that followed were the happiest Elena could remember. She continued working at Vincent's library, became close friends with the older man who treated her like the daughter he'd never had. She and Adrian navigated the transition from roommates to partners with surprising ease, building a relationship based on mutual respect and honest communication rather than power dynamics and control. Marcus violated the restraining order one final time in March, showing up drunk at the Meridian demanding to see Elena. Security called the police, and he was arrested and sentenced to 90 days in jail for repeated violations. When he got out, he'd moved to another state, apparently finally accepting that Elena was permanently beyond his reach. Detective Chen called to inform Elena of Marcus's departure. "You did good," Chen said. "Most victims don't get this kind of resolution. You should be proud." Elena was proud. Proud of leaving, proud of fighting, proud of building a life so full and beautiful that Marcus's shadow couldn't touch it anymore. On a warm evening in late spring, almost 8 months after the night that changed everything, Elena and Adrian sat on their balcony watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and amber. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked quietly. "That night I broke down your door and everything changed?" Elena thought about it honestly, about the fear and uncertainty and trauma that had followed, about the hard work of healing and rebuilding, about the terror of trusting someone again. "No," she said finally, "not for a second. That scream was the bravest thing I'd ever done, and you hearing it was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me."
I think we're both pretty lucky. Adrian pulled her closer, and Elena let herself sink into his warmth, into the security of being chosen rather than claimed. She'd screamed that night not knowing if anyone would hear, not knowing if help would come, not knowing that the man next door would crash through her walls and offer her a future she hadn't dared to imagine. But he had heard. He had come. And together they'd built something beautiful from the wreckage of what she'd escaped. Elena Wright, just Elena now, free and whole and deeply loved, looked out over the city and felt nothing but gratitude for the scream that had shattered her silence, for the man who'd answered it, and for the courage she'd found to accept the help she'd needed and build the life she deserved. Some screams changed everything. Hers had changed her entire world, and she would never regret making noise loud enough to be heard.